Chapter 2820, 2820 Vermilion Bird Seal. Chapter 2820, 2820 Vermilion Bird Seal. 2820 Vermilion Bird Seal. Ling Han frowned. Though he had still destroyed the metallic figure with a single strike, its power was increasing. It was at the first tier the first time, but now it was at the second tier. Boom! The metallic figure attacked for the third time. It was still a palm strike descending straight down on Ling Han. Golden light flashed, wanting to smash him dead. Ling Han replied with a punch. Boom! Amidst a massive bang, the metallic figure actually managed to parry Ling Han's strike. This was third-tier power. Peng, peng, peng. The metallic figure brandished both fists madly, continuously barraging Ling Han. Its speed was astonishingly fast, as if it was able to topple mountains and overturn seas. It was slowly adapting to the power of the challenger. After every time it was killed, its power would increase by another level, and if it could continue to be strengthened like this, how could it be killed? Ling Han set this thought aside first, and pounded this guy madly. Since he had yet to advance the Fists of Fury to the third tier, he might as well temper and practice well with this guy. The two men fought intensely. This metallic figure's attacks were slightly mechanical, and stuck to certain patterns. Hence, in less than 15 minutes, Ling Han punched his fist right through its chest, creating a hole directly in its chest. It quickly recovered, its fists smashing down madly. Its power had shockingly increased slightly again. Fortunately, the degree of its improvement was not very large, and it had not directly crossed the boundaries of the fourth tier. Instead, it had reached an extent that just slightly surpassed Ling Han. This made the battle become even more intense, but Ling Han was a real person, after all. After 30 minutes, he once again found an opening, and killed this metallic figure. As expected, it naturally recovered once more. Fight, 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 fight. Every time it was killed by Ling Han, the metallic figure would grow slightly stronger, making it harder and harder to kill. This was exactly what Ling Han wanted to practice his fist technique. He, too, needed an opponent that could match him. In the White Tiger Palace, the number of enemies was adequate, and here the enemy was strong enough for him. Kill, kill, kill. He killed the metallic figure time after time, but the metallic figure was also becoming stronger and stronger, and its counterattacks became more and more powerful. 1 year, 10 years, 100 years, and finally 700 years later, though Ling Han was still able to kill the metallic figure, the time he needed was increasing further and further. Moreover, he would have to pay an exorbitant price for it as well. More importantly, the metallic figure would immediately recover after it was killed, and Ling Han was not given the opportunity to recover at all. Once or twice, this would be fine, but after several dozen, and over 100 times later, the pressure on Ling Han was also extremely heavy. Ling Han was sure that this test was definitely not a matter of how long they could last. Otherwise, he would only have to drag out the battle with the metallic figure from before when it had not been so strong. What this test was focused on was killing. Just how many kills would be considered a pass? Ling Han did not know. He could only kill the metallic figure again and again, and perhaps he would be able to pass the test this time, or perhaps he still needed another 100 times, another 1,000 times, or 10,000 times. There really was not the slightest hope. Similar to the White Tiger Palace, it was very likely that one would lose all fighting spirit as the battles continued and give up. Ling Han did not. The strength of his willpower and fighting spirit was something that no one could imagine. He simply continued to temper Fists of Fury again and again, and after over 100,000 years had passed, he had a feeling that there was an opening that he was faced with now. If he could reach this opening, the Fists of Fury could advance to the third tier. If so, he would just fight to his heart's content. With a battle cry, he attacked madly. Peng, peng, peng. Very quickly, the metallic figure was killed again. However, it immediately made a comeback, and became even more frightening. What Ling Han wanted was precisely that his opponent was strong. If his opponent was not strong enough, it would be very hard for him to break through his own limits. Come at me. Peng. However, the metallic figure's battle prowess was already tremendously close to the fourth tier this time, and it turned around to suppress Ling Han. In an exchange of strikes, Ling Han felt his arms tremble in pain and twist unbelievably. His arms were broken, but he did not even grunt. With sheer strength of mind, power surged into him, and forcefully righted his arms as he clashed with the metallic figure again. Ling Han yelled, his power blazing and fighting spirit soaring. Peng, peng, peng. In a single stroke, he delivered several thousand punches, and instantly shattered that metallic figure. He laughed loudly. His fists of fury had finally been advanced to the 3rd tier, and that was what allowed him to unleash such great might. However, he looked at his hands, and both his fists were gone. They had been destroyed in that intense clash from before. Ling Han channeled the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, and his hands immediately grew back rapidly. However, the metallic figure did not come back to life again this time. Ling Han faltered, and then felt that he was being guided by great power. Wang. He appeared inside a palace. Boom. The power inside his body boiled, making him feel like he was newly born. He had passed the test, so his spirit had returned to his body, creating an explosion of power. Ling Han looked into his body, and discovered that his cultivation level had increased by a particular amount again, but this time he had only spent over 100,000 years in the spiritual world, so there was naturally not much time that had passed in the real world. Hence, his cultivation level had only increased a slight amount. Ling Han was not concerned, because Fists of Fury had already reached the 3rd tier, and was worthy of his battle prowess now. Furthermore, Fists of Fury was a cultivation technique that belonged to him completely, which was more useful than any Heavenly Venerate technique that anyone had taught him. Ling Han was sure that this was the best Heavenly Venerate technique for him on the level of the 3rd tier. Wang. A golden bone suddenly appeared ahead of him. This should be a hip bone, and there was a blurred seal on it. His inheritance was here. Ling Han stretched out his hand to touch it. Boom. Instantly, a seal flashed in his mind, as if countless flames were burning, wanting to turn his mind into a sea of fire. The Heavenly Venerate 4 Directions' voice rang out again, and the words he said were the exact same words that he had said in the White Tiger Palace. Ling Han began to study this seal. The time needed for this was very long. 10,000 years passed, and he finally stood up, a smile appearing on his face. 11th seal, got it. With the boost from this seal, the speed of Ling Han's cultivation could increase to 17 times, which was equivalent to the 10th seal's effect. The Heavenly Venerate 4 Directions has said that with the 4 seals merged into one could learn a secret technique of his. However, that mysterious woman had been able to pass through the White Tiger Palace, so she may also be able to pass through Azure Dragon Palace and Black Tortoise Palace. Judging by the direction that she had taken, she should have gone to the Azure Dragon Palace one. If she has taken the seal from the Azure Dragon Palace, then even if I manage to obtain the remaining seal in the Black Tortoise Palace, it will still be impossible for me to learn that secret technique. Too bad, too bad. Ling Han shook his head. Though this heavenly venerable seal could be severed by its master, that was done with the price of ripping off a corner of their own mind. For heavenly venerates, that was still a severe injury. Whatever offer he made, it was probably impossible that that woman would surrender the Azure Dragon seal to him. Moreover, she was a 4th tier, and an extremely powerful 4th tier at that. If he really dared to raise this issue, she might turn around and refine him instead. Similarly, she would also be able to obtain the seals of the 4 Directions, and obtain that secret technique. Let's go to the Black Tortoise Palace. Ling Han stood up, and after finding the exit, he immediately left. Then, after distinguishing his directions, he headed towards the Black Tortoise Palace. Not much longer afterwards, he saw the 3rd burial mound. He entered, his eyes sweeping over his surroundings. He saw that there were still many people gathered at the plaza, but this was very similar to the White Tiger Palace. Everyone was not lining up, but rather scattered in 2s and 3s, looking towards the entrance into the palace. There was someone sealing off the entrance there as well. Chapter 2821, 2821 Number 1 Prodigy. Chapter 2821, 2821 Number 1 Prodigy. 2821 Number 1 Prodigy. Ling Han sighed. Why did people keep doing this kind of thing? He made some queries, and as it turned out, these were not the first people to seal off the entrance. 30,000 years ago, there were already 4th-tier elites sealing off the entrance here, but as their disciples and descendants arrived, and were unable to pass the test after all of them had made an attempt, these 4th tiers left helplessly, switching to another palace to try again. However, after this batch of people left, not many centuries passed before a different batch of 4th-tier elites blocked the entrance. They, too, had their descendants and disciples that were making their way here. Ling Han shook his head. There really was no end to this. This also showed how valuable a heavenly venerable seal was. If a 4th tier could not obtain it for themselves, they could place their hopes on their descendants and disciples. In fact, they could even forcefully extract it from them once the latter had obtained it. With the temptation of heavenly venerable seal, what could not be discarded? In Ling Han's heart, family was of the utmost importance, but in the eyes of the majority of heavenly venerates, increasing their own strength was the only thing that mattered to them. Ling Han's gaze wandered around. He was looking for Ping Xinghai to see if he could trick him again. His gaze searched all around, and he couldn't help but sigh. Ping Xinghai wasn't here. If Ping Xinghai knew about this, he would probably curse fluidly. You are really hanging on to me, aren't you? What to do now? After passing 2 tests, and obtaining the inheritance comprising 2 heavenly venerable seals, Ling Han was sure that he would definitely be able to obtain the heavenly venerable seal inside the Black Tortoise Palace, but if he couldn't enter, then there was no need to even mention it. He thought long and hard, but the number of 4th tiers that were blocking the entrance had reached as many as 7. Even if Ping Xinghai had really come, and Ling Han had managed to successfully trick him into doing the same thing again, the chances of his being able to sneak in through the chaos would have been close to 0. Moreover, would Ping Xinghai be tricked again after falling for Ling Han's trick before? He was not that stupid. Ling Han decided he'd just wait and see. Ling Han sat down at one side. He would definitely not give up the chance of obtaining this heavenly venerable seal. As he sat, another 2 years passed. In this period, a great many people had come and left. Some veterans left helplessly, and some rookies, relying on their master and clan background, wanted to approach to ask for mercy, but they were all refused, and no one could enter into the palace. A thought suddenly flashed in Ling Han's mind, and his eyes snapped open abruptly. Here was another person. This was a mighty figure, a frightening aura exuding from him, turning into flames that unfurled around him. Ling Han's eyes involuntarily narrowed. This was someone familiar. Zhuang Feirue. When a heavenly venerable seal had appeared, even if some people got the news later than others, as long as they got wind of the news, they would definitely come to take a look. Close to 1 million years had passed, and Zhuang Feirue's aura had become more stable and frightening. Clearly, his battle prowess had improved considerably. He was a naturally gifted prodigy. In the past, he was known as the strongest prodigy. It was only afterwards, when he was trapped in the 2nd spatial level, that everyone thought he had died, and with the abrupt appearance of people like Lin Yolian and Xin Qihu, he was gradually forgotten. However, his strength could not be denied. At present, he was definitely an overlord among 4th tiers, and there were few that could match him. As he headed straight for the entrance of the palace, it seemed like there was lightning flashing with every step he took. Ling Han's eyes lit up. This was an opportunity. He moved quietly and very carefully because once Zhuang Feirue discovered his presence, the latter would definitely turn around to suppress him first. Stop, my friend. A 4th tier stretched out his hand and pressed downwards. Scram. Zhuang Feirue was extremely domineering. Within 4th tier, there was no need for him to pay anyone any regard. If he didn't like the looks of them, he would move directly. He was invincible. You have gone too far, another 4th tier said. If you guys don't scram, I'll send you flying. Zhuang Feirue moved directly, charging towards those 7 4th tier elites. How dare you? Those 7 4th tiers all humphed angrily. You are too arrogant, aren't you? Being able to advance to the heavenly venerable tier, which of them was not a gifted prodigy? There was already no such thing as differences between king tiers and monarch tiers. If their cultivation level was completely equal, battle prowess should be equal as well. Isn't fighting against 7 all alone just asking for a beating? The 7 4th tier elites all humphed coldly, and moved to suppress Zhuang Feirue. Peng, Peng, peng. The 8 of them fought intensely, and what caused everyone's jaws to drop in absolute shock and astonishment was that not only had Zhuang Feirui not fallen into a disadvantage, he had an absolute upper hand. Impossible. Everyone was dumbfounded. 7 fourth tiers, all of them at peak stage 4th tier at that, combined their efforts, and actually were no match for a single 4th tier. It should be known that Zhuang Feirui was only a middle stage 4th tier at best, and it was possible that he had not attained that level yet. How could he be so strong? This is a supreme prodigy, someone exclaimed shakily. Who is this guy? You guys don't even know who he is. Zhuang Feirui, the #1 prodigy of several epochs ago. What? It's actually him? Why did I hear that he had died a long time ago? That's right. I also heard that he had died. Died? He had only been a 3rd tier then, but he had been trapped for several epochs in a danger zone of the realm battlefield. Not only had he not died, he had even advanced further, and stepped into the 4th tier. Hiss, that is too amazing. Of course, as expected of the #1 prodigy. Everyone was exclaiming in shock, and amidst their surprised exclamations, Zhuang Feirui was also defeating those 7 4th tiers in a clean sweep. Gathering several dozen powers of dimension when he had been a 1st tier was an advantage that would be eternally maintained by any 1st tier. However, the higher the cultivation level, the further this advantage would be considerably weakened. It could not be helped. Aside from Ling Han, others would only consolidate their power of dimensions into a core, which had limited growth. Zhuang Feirui swept his eyes over his surroundings, appearing insufferably arrogant. He had the right to do that because he was the #1 prodigy, who was unmatched among his equals. Who would be able to match him? Show off, Ling Han inwardly said. This guy had probably forgotten how he had been harshly thrashed by Ling Han in a battle of equal cultivation levels, hadn't he? However, without the suppression of cultivation level, Zhuang Feirui was indeed overwhelmingly strong. Without anyone at or above the 5th tier, who would be capable of suppressing him? Xiu. A figure entered from the entrance, revealing an extremely beautiful and graceful outline. This was an exquisite beauty. Even if everyone here were heavenly venerates, they still had their breaths taken away upon their first glimpse of her. Yet Ling Han's eyes narrowed. This was shockingly that mysterious woman from the White Tiger Palace, who had been inconceivably strong. She had already obtained the inheritance of the Azure Dragon Palace? She definitely had, or it was impossible that she would have taken so much time to make it here. This exquisite beauty walked gracefully and elegantly. She seemed to be walking lightly and extremely relaxedly, but her speed was considerably fast. Very soon, she drew near to the doors of the palace. Zhuang Feirui glanced over, revealing a hint of displeasure. He did very much admire this beauty's exquisite appearance, but didn't she know the rule first come, first served? He had just overthrown those bullies blocking the doorway, and she simply wanted to come and reap the benefits without saying a word. Zhuang Feirui stretched out his arm to stop her. Friend, don't you think that you should ask me for my opinion first? That mysterious woman's steps paused momentarily. An ancient historical site is not something that belongs to anyone, so why do I need to ask permission from you? Zhuang Feirui's eyes sharpened. Friend, you have gone too far. He had always been the overbearing type. Even if this woman was incomparably beautiful, so what? If she went against his will, he would mercilessly suppress her anyway. This was a chance. Ling Han moved silently. He, for one, knew that this mysterious woman was extremely powerful. At the very least, she would not be weaker than Zhuang Feirui. If the two of them started to battle, that would be the best chance for him to slip into the palace. That exquisite beauty ignored Zhuang Feirui completely, and walked delicately and gracefully, continuing on her way. Chapter 28-22, 28-22 There was no comparison at all. Chapter 28-22, 28-22 There was no comparison at all. 28-22 There was no comparison at all. Humph. Zhuang Feirui reached out, and tried to grab the stunning beauty. Peng. The stunning beauty gave a light wave of her hand, yet it caused a surge of incomparably terrifying power, and Zhuang Feirui was sent flying and became a small dot in an instant, vanishing from sight. Everyone gaped and was speechless, as if they had seen a ghost. This had to be fake, right? Zhuang Feirue was already so powerful, having suppressed 7 4th-tier heavenly venerates solely with his own strength. However, when faced with this stunning beauty, he wasn't her match at all. This woman. What kind of monster was she? Ling Han was also taken aback. He had known that this woman had been extremely strong, but he had never imagined her to be this strong. Although she has achieved such a feat, this stunning beauty didn't seem to care, as if she was just brushing off some dust. Instead, she glanced around, and her gaze locked on Ling Han very quickly. Ling Han suddenly felt like he was a mouse being watched by a cat, which caused him to feel a cold chill running through his body. This woman was indeed too strong. Why sneak around, the woman said, and made a gesture of invitation towards the revolving doorway of light. Ling Han was surprised. Aren't you afraid that I'll get my hands on the heavenly venerable seal first before you do? However, when the other party had already invited him in such a manner, how could he bring himself to back down? He took large strides and walked towards the doorway of light. Zhuang Feirue flew back from a distance. Immediately, he gritted his teeth and said, Ling Han. He was a 4th tier, and he could see through Ling Han's disguise at a glance. He wanted to make a move, but when the stunning beauty turned her gaze towards him, it caused him to come to a halt. The opponent was at the peak of the 4th tier, and was even more freakish than him. There was no telling how many powers of dimensions she had condensed. It was definitely not something he could match. If he was to step forward to battle, he would be bringing humiliation upon himself. Damn it, there was a heavenly venerable seal this man possessed, which Zhuang Feirue absolutely had to get his hands on. Moreover, Ling Han also caused his reputation to hit rock bottom. If he couldn't kill Ling Han, it would be a stigma that would follow him for life. Ling Han walked over with a smile and said, Miss, do you intend to compete with me? Unexpectedly, the stunning beauty actually nodded. That's right. Okay, Ling Han boldly agreed. A woman like herself actually possessed such a gallant spirit, she obviously could have driven him away, or at least grabbed the first opportunity, but instead gave him a chance to compete fairly. If Ling Han hadn't even dared to accept the challenge, then he would have been a man in vain. The two stepped forward together. Shoo, they entered the doorway of light. As soon as this stunning beauty left, everyone finally came back to their senses, and relaxed themselves after being in the midst of that extremely oppressive aura. This woman. Who was she really? Someone murmured. She's extremely formidable indeed, being able to send even a first-rate prodigy such as Zhuang Feirue flying with a single palm strike. Is there really such a person in the world? The oppressive atmosphere gradually disappeared, and everyone was full of curiosity about who such a powerful woman was. Do you really want to know who she is? Someone suddenly said leisurely. Immediately, everyone's gaze turned in the direction of the voice. Even Zhuang Feirue was no exception, as he really wanted to know the identity of this woman. She is Lin Yolian. Gasp. Everyone gasped. If Zhuang Feirue was only the #1 prodigy of his era, then Lin Yolian was the greatest prodigy of all time. Only Xin Qihu could rival her. Of course, there was another Wu Haoyang after him. In comparison, Zhuang Feirue was absolutely nothing. Lin Yolian. I didn't expect that not only is her strength earth-shattering, even her appearance is so beautiful as well. If I could take her as my wife, someone began to let their imagination run wild. The greatest prodigy of all eternity. She truly lives up to the name. Even Zhuang Feirue had nothing further to say. Lin Yolian wasn't merely of a slightly higher level than him, but also far superseded him in terms of natural talent for cultivation. What else could he do besides resigning himself to the situation when faced with such an existence? Who would be capable of having such a beautiful prodigy in his embrace? Zhuang Feirue stepped out and entered the doorway of light without hesitation. His natural talent and strength were indeed not as good as Lin Yolian's, but great opportunities weren't something one could definitely obtain by being strong. Ling Han found himself in a plane again, but the stunning beauty was nowhere to be seen. This was within the spiritual world, so it was normal not to have the existence of the other party. The bodies of both parties should be in the hall right now. There was a flag in the plane, with only one word written on it, defend. Ling Han knew that this was Black Tortoise Palace, so the test had to be related to defense. What could it be? A feeling of danger suddenly tugged at his heart. All of a sudden, he looked up and saw a large stretch of meteors falling from the sky, smashing towards him. It was really a massive stretch, covering the entire area. There was nowhere to hide. Ling Han hastened to use the fists of fury, blasting towards the sky. Peng, 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 the meteors were shattered into pieces. These pieces were shattered before they fell onto him. The first round of attacks had been perfectly resolved. However, right on the heels of the earlier attack, another large wave of meteors came crashing down, this time with even more force. Ling Han thought of the test at Vermilion Bird Hall. He knew that these attacks would increase in level gradually, in search of his limit, and then would start bombarding wildly within the scope of his limit. This was the real test. He easily resolved this wave, but after several waves of meteors falling, he was also being pushed to his limit. At this time, even if he blasted with fists of fury, there was no way for him to completely resolve the situation. Furthermore, there were great numbers of meteors crashing down violently, which forced him to channel the indestructible Heaven Scroll to take the attack head-on. This was the main idea of Black Tortoise Palace's test, to take on a beating. Hong, long, long, more meteors fell, turning into an endless catastrophe. Ling Han had noble ideals, and he didn't believe that he couldn't stop it. Come. Meteors turned into a rain of meteors, coming wave after wave, and requiring him to go all out in resistance. In the face of such an attack, Ling Han was not qualified to fight back, so he could only channel the indestructible Heaven Scroll. However, the indestructible Heaven Scroll was only created by a first tier, and had huge limitations. Then again, what could be better than the indestructible Heaven Scroll as far as defense was concerned? While taking on the beating, Ling Han was also comprehending and improving the deficiencies in the indestructible Heaven Scroll to adapt it to his current battle prowess. Hong, long, long, the meteor rain seemed to never stop, one wave after another intending to blast Ling Han to pieces. This was the most annoying part. If one could know how many waves one would need to bear to end it, then at least there would still be hope. But what about now? It could be over right after the next wave, or it could be that one would have to bear tens of thousands of waves more, which was enough to make someone with a strong willpower give up. Ling Han gritted his teeth and continued to persevere. This wasn't a battle, but rather taking a beating, which wasn't in line with his path of cultivation, but for the sake of the heavenly venerable seal and all the more to test his resilience, he was unwilling to back down. As time passed, Ling Han continued to deepen his study of the indestructible Heaven Scroll, but this indestructible Heaven Scroll wasn't created by him, and it was improving far from as quickly as Fists of Fury. This time, what Ling Han really depended on was his willpower. He kept roaring as meteors hit him one after another. It really hurt. 1,000 years, 10,000 years, 100,000 years. It was not until 300,000 years had passed that Ling Han suddenly felt his whole body relax, and then found himself appearing in another place. He had passed the test. At the same time, a strong aura immediately arose from his surroundings, just like a violent storm. Lin Yolian had also passed the test. Ling Han couldn't help but be filled with admiration. Such a stunning beauty could also withstand the bombardment of 300,000 years. Her willpower was truly amazing. Chapter 28-23, 28-23 Combining the Seals. Chapter 28-23, 28-23 Combining the Seals. 28-23 Combining the Seals. There were only the two of them in the hall. Ling Han wasn't surprised. Even if someone came in halfway, they couldn't resist the impact of the meteor rain, so they were disqualified earlier. Wang, a leg bone appeared, entirely pale golden in color, with a vague flickering seal on it. Ling Han stretched out his hand, and pressed it on the leg bone. At the same time, Lin Yolian also stretched out her slender hand and touched the leg bone. A ray of light burst out, and the leg bone emitted an overwhelming brilliance, but this was not all. Ling Han's and Lin Yolian's mind shone brightly as well. Wang, Wang, Wang. 3 seals rose from the crown of their respective heads. One turned into a white tiger, one turned into a vermilion bird, and one turned into an azure dragon, while the light rising from the leg bone also turned into a black tortoise. Ling Han couldn't help being stunned. Wasn't it that a heavenly venerable seal could only be transmitted, and not passed on as an inheritance? But he could clearly sense the azure dragon seal, and was able to completely grasp it. This is a combination seal. Lin Yolian started speaking. When there is resonance between the 4 seals, then it would materialize, but it is only limited to a duration when the seal of the black tortoise hasn't dissipated. She paused for a moment, and then added, "Hurry up and comprehend it, there's not much time." Ling Han quickly regained his composure. Who cared what the reason was? His priority now was to master the 2 seals of the azure dragon and black tortoise. Both of them sat down cross-legged, imprinting the heavenly venerable seals firmly in their minds. 3 days later, the golden leg bone disintegrated into specks of light before vanishing without a trace. However, Ling Han revealed a look of satisfaction as he had imprinted the 2 seals of azure dragon and black tortoise in his mind. He didn't dare to be careless, and began studying them again. The same was true for Lin Yolian. She had a bigger task at hand as she needed to comprehend 3 seals. Time passed quietly, and soon it was already 20,000 years later. Ling Han opened his eyes. He had already mastered all 4 direction seals. A single seal could increase his cultivation speed by 17 times, and it was the same for the increase in battle prowess. Moreover, the 4 seals could actually be channeled simultaneously in battle, which would be terrifying indeed as it would cause his power to soar by 39 times. What was going on here? If the 4 seals could be superimposed, shouldn't it be 68 times? What was the meaning of this 39 times? Moreover, the effects of heavenly venerable seals couldn't be superimposed. No matter how many seals were being channeled, the one which could truly exert its power would be the strongest one. This ought to be related to combination seals, right? Ling Han thought of what Lin Yolian had said before, and was absolutely confident in his theory, but the other party was still in the midst of meditation with her eyes closed. It would be impossible for him to wake up the other party to pose his query, thereby interrupting the other party's comprehension. This would be creating a deadly feud. Moreover, it seemed that Lin Yolian had long expected that they would jointly unlock the 4th heavenly venerable seal, which would allow both of them to master the 4 direction seals. So that was the reason why the other party had especially invited Ling Han to enter the doorway of light together, and to take on the test at the same time, completely in synchrony. Ling Han thought about it, and decided to continue meditating while waiting for Lin Yolian as he wanted clarification. Of course, he wouldn't waste time, because the heavenly venerate 4 directions had said that if he could master all the 4 seals, he would be able to comprehend a unique skill contained within them. Ling Han started to make deductions. Soon, he had some clues, and was slowly making progress. After 9,000 years had passed, Ling Han stood up abruptly, and then punched out. Boom, azure dragon, white tiger, vermilion bird, and black tortoise all appeared and charged forward. As the 4 forms materialized, power soared exponentially. Ling Han channeled the 4 direction seals, and simultaneously punched out for the 2nd time. This time, the extraordinary sight was even more astonishing. It was as though all 4 divine beasts had solidified, bearing a massive destructive aura. When this secret technique and the 4 direction seals are being channeled at the same time, the power released is truly amazing. Ling Han was filled with admiration. This was the ultimate technique created by a 5th tier heavenly venerate, so it could be used at least up to the battle prowess of a 5th tier. However, my true support would be the Fists of Fury, which must not be discarded. While waiting, Ling Han practiced the fist technique. After another millennium had passed, Lin Yolian finally woke up from her state of meditation. If you have any questions, just ask. Where I'm capable of answering, I will do my best to answer. This was the first sentence that the woman said, as if she had read Ling Han's mind. It really wasn't good for a woman to be so smart. It would cause a man not to have any sense of accomplishment. Ling Han chuckled. Miss, if I may ask, what is a combination seal? According to my father's statistics, there are a total of 999 heavenly venerable seals. If they can be fully mastered and formed into sequences, then each seal can resonate with one another and exert unimaginable power, Lin Yolian said. She paused slightly, and then said, however, even if you don't master all these seals, but have obtained the adjacent seals, they can still resonate and give rise to amplification of power. It's just that the effect will be slightly inferior. Ling Han gave an "oh" and nodded. No wonder his strength wasn't increased by 68 times when he had channeled the 4 directions seals simultaneously, but rather 39 times over. He was stumped for words. If he could further obtain adjacent seals, then wouldn't his battle prowess be increased 50 times, 100 times, or 1,000 times? You guessed it right, Lin Yolian said. So, even if you have the same number of heavenly venerable seals, and they are of the same level, but one party's seals are a series, while the others are not, there will be a huge difference in battle prowess between the two. She glanced at Ling Han, and added, since I started this, I will simply explain some more. The 999 heavenly venerable seals are divided into 9 levels, and each level has 111 seals. My father proceeded to sort them. The first level of heavenly venerable seals can increase battle prowess by about 4 to 10 times. The second level, between 11 and 20 times. Going by the same logic, the 9th level will reach between 81 and 90 times. However, don't think that low-level seals are useless. Lin Yolian looked solemn. Due to the continuity and ability of combination of the heavenly venerable seals, we absolutely mustn't ignore any of the heavenly venerable seals. Moreover, even if it is a low-level seal, as long as it can be combined, the power upon being channeled together cannot be underestimated. Ling Han nodded. His eyes were really opened today. In his thoughts, he was becoming more and more curious about the identity of this stunning beauty. What was her background, and how did she come to know so many secrets? He couldn't help asking, Miss, if I may ask, have we met before? Being a dignified 4th tier, much less someone who could suppress a super genius like Zhuang Feirue, why would she behave so courteously to a 1st tier like Ling Han? Lin Yolian smiled faintly. My father and brother think very highly of brother Lin. Ling Han was taken aback for a moment, and suddenly a conjecture surged in his heart. He said, you are Lin Yolian. Besides this prodigious woman, who else could suppress Zhuang Feirue with one move? Apart from Lin Luo, how many other people would know that there were 999 heavenly venerable seals in the Genesis world? And would even know about such secrets as the combination seals? Lin Yolian smiled faintly. Correct. It was indeed as expected. Ling Han nodded and sighed inwardly. He owed the Lin clan another favor. Brother Ling, senior brother Zhu Heng has already told my father about your conjecture. My father actually has the same idea, but no one is hysteria, so it is impossible to know how far it can go, Lin Yolian said with a solemn voice. My father asked me to send word to brother Ling to persist in your efforts and keep climbing to the top. In the future, you will definitely be an important link in quelling the disaster brought about by hysteria. Chapter 28-24, 28-24 Good times don't last long? Chapter 28-24, 28-24 Good times don't last long? 28-24 Good times don't last long? Ling Han felt extremely flattered by the praise. A paramount 7th tier heavenly venerate saw such promise in him. During Ling Han's time in the realm battlefield, Lin Luo had already thought highly of him and been optimistic about his future. As such, he had given Ling Han quite a bit of help. Meanwhile, his 3 disciples Zhu Heng, Chu Hao, and Lin Xiaoyang and his son had further provided Ling Han with a lot of help. It was thanks to Ling Han's time cultivating at the Lin clan that he was able to reach the 8th heaven at such a lightning-quick speed. I must express my sincere gratitude to Senior Lin, Ling Han said. Keep up the good work. I also have high hopes for you, Lin Yolian said with a nod. There was a look of encouragement on her face. She paused for a moment before saying, let's go. The two of them quickly found an exit. Upon stepping through it, they immediately found themselves in a vast plain. Lin Yolian waved her hand before gracefully disappearing into the distance. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Was there a man who could capture the attention of this pharaoh-like woman? He shook his head and pushed away these thoughts. This had nothing to do with him, he already had a warm and loving family. Ling Han left the ancient tomb. Regardless of whether it was the heavenly venerable seals or the secret technique concealed within it, he had already obtained them all. Thus, was there any need to stay? Moreover, his identity had already been exposed, so it was certain that many elites had their sights set on him. As such, his best option was to leave. After arriving back at the world's paramount martial academy, Ling Han reunited with the Empress and the others. After all, they had already agreed to gather there if they were separated from each other in the ancient tomb. None of the others had gained anything from this trip. However, after learning that Ling Han had obtained all 4 of the heavenly venerable seals, they all felt extremely happy for him. It was a shame, though, that Ling Han couldn't teach the 4 forms technique to the others, as this required the support of 4 heavenly venerable seals. Without these seals, all attempts would be futile. "Let's go, let's visit our daughter," Ling Han said with a smile. He and the Empress changed their appearance a bit before entering the martial academy. However, after walking around the entire martial academy, they discovered that their daughter still had yet to return. Ling Han couldn't help but feel a little worried. His daughter was far too beautiful, so what would happen if she encountered a man with impure motives? He clearly knew that Ling Shi possessed power that could rival pseudo-heavenly venerates, yet he still felt extremely worried at this moment. This was his worry as a father. "I can't help but feel worried," Ling Han said. "I need to look for her." The Empress felt much more relaxed and at ease than him, but since Ling Han had decided to look for his daughter, she naturally wouldn't be against it. They set off to look for Ling Shi. Several years later, they arrived at a small town. According to some records, Ling Shi had once stayed here 7 years ago. They were very close to finding their daughter. From what I've gathered, Ling Shi was searching for the treasures of an ancient celestial king. This is the most likely location, so why don't we wait here? We might come across her at any moment, Ling Han said. The Empress nodded in agreement. They settled down, waiting to reunite with their daughter. Ling Han now possessed 13 heavenly venerable seals, and if he channeled them together, his cultivation speed could be increased 109-fold. This seemed astounding. However, taking into account the boundless powers of dimension within him, this speed was in fact still very slow. At the very least, the cultivation speed of the Empress was far quicker than his. Right now, she had already reached the late stage of the first tier, and wasn't far from reaching the peak stage. As for Ling Han, he had only just discovered the path to reach the middle stage. However, it would still be quite a long time until he actually reached it. Oh, heavenly venerable seals. He still needed many, many more of them. As they waited, 37 years passed. This wasn't a very long time. After all, spending tens of thousands of years on some random adventure was nothing in the eyes of Ling Han. On this day, astonishing thunder and lightning suddenly boomed through heaven and earth, causing the ground to quake, and making it seem like the sky was about to collapse. Ling Han's eyes suddenly snapped open, and he gazed into the distance. It was as if nothing could escape his gaze, no matter how far. A smile spread across his face. However, his expression quickly froze, and it appeared indescribably strange. Every father who had experienced his daughter marrying would understand what this expression represented. Little Shi has a companion, the Empress said. She could also see Ling Shi flying toward the small town. However, she wasn't alone, and there was an elegant-looking man next to her. He appeared handsome and extraordinary. "This bastard," Ling Han murmured. He felt a murderous urge. It wasn't long before Ling Shi and the man arrived above the small town. The Empress reached out with her divine sense, causing Ling Shi to instantly stop in her tracks. "What's wrong, junior sister Ling?" the young man asked. Ling Shi wore a surprised expression as she replied, "My mother's here." "Oh." The young man hurriedly nodded before saying, "Then we must pay Auntie a visit." The two of them descended, landing before the inn that Ling Han and the Empress were staying in. The Empress walked out first. They hadn't seen their daughter for many years, so even with her aloof personality, she still missed her a little. "Mom!" Ling Shi exclaimed as she jumped into the Empress' embrace. After so many years, she had already grown up and become a young lady whose beauty was in no way inferior to the Empress. Standing together, they were like two lotuses who were equally beautiful and equally breathtaking. The Empress lightly stroked her daughter's head. As for the young man, she completely ignored him. To say nothing of the fact that he had no intimate relationship with Lingxi, even if they were married, the Empress would still definitely ignore him. There was zero possibility that she would like him the more that she looked at him. "Mom, where's Dad?" Lingxi asked. "Upstairs," the Empress replied as she pointed up. "Huh? Then why isn't Dad coming down?" Lingxi asked in confusion. In the Ling clan, it was definitely Ling Han who doted on her the most. Now that they hadn't seen each other for so long, he was actually remaining seated upstairs. "He's a bit angry right now," the Empress replied with a smile. Lingxi felt even more confused. Angry? Angry about what? Was there anything to be angry about? She hurriedly ran upstairs, saying, "I'm going to see Dad first." She had no time to care about her companion. The young man bowed, and said, "Greetings, Auntie. I'm Hao Jing." He appeared neither haughty nor humble. He either was an extremely proud person, or he had an extremely powerful background. Otherwise, how would he dare to act so casually before a first-tier heavenly venerate as a pseudo-heavenly venerate? The Empress made no reply. Apart from Ling Han and her daughter, everyone else was worthless in her eyes. Hao Jing couldn't help but feel slightly awkward after being given the cold shoulder. He could only raise his hand to rub his nose. Upstairs, Lingxi immediately saw the sitting Ling Han after entering the room. However, his eyes were tightly shut, and it was as if he were sleeping. She walked over and called softly, "Dad." Ling Han ignored her. Only after Lingxi called him a few more times did he finally open his eyes, saying, "It's been so long, yet you didn't come back to visit." Elevenor returned once. However, Ling City already didn't exist, Lingxi said. "But I know just how capable Dad is, so I knew that there definitely wouldn't be any dangers." "Of course, your dad Ling Han was just about to brag." However, he immediately stopped himself, knowing that he couldn't let his daughter change the topic. He cleared his throat, and asked, "Who's that brat outside?" Lingxi came to a sudden realization. No wonder her dad was feeling angry. It was all because of jealousy. She couldn't help but find this funny. "He's just a senior from the Martial Academy. We coincidentally traveled to the ruins together to search for treasures. He's called Hao Jing." Hao Jing? Good times don't last long one. Ling Han shook his head, musing, what a crappy name. Lingxi was rendered speechless. Ling Han disliked him so much that even his name needed to be made fun of. Chapter 28-25, 28-25 Interrogation. Chapter 28-25, 2825 Interrogation. 2825 Interrogation. "Dad, don't misunderstand, I and Hao Jing only came across each other by coincidence. There's nothing between us," Lingxi explained with a smile. "Really?" Ling Han asked in suspicion. "Really?" Lingxi said with a nod. Only at this moment did Ling Han chuckle and say, "And I was just thinking, that pretty boy has such inferior looks, so how could he be worthy of my precious daughter?" Lingxi was rendered speechless. Hao Jing also had a powerful background, with his father being a fifth-tier heavenly venerate. In the Martial Academy, he belonged to the group of people who could do as they pleased. She naturally had no intentions of praising Hao Jing, since there was nothing between them anyway. Moreover, she didn't want Ling Han to draw any incorrect conclusions. She accompanied Ling Han downstairs, where they saw Hao Jing awkwardly standing around. Meanwhile, the breathtaking Empress was like a lone moon appreciating her own beauty, completely ignoring Hao Jing. This caused him to feel extremely uneasy and fidgety. Upon seeing Ling Han, Hao Jing hurriedly walked over to pay his respects, saying, "Greetings, uncle. I'm Hao Jing." He appeared like a modest and respectful young man. Good times don't last long. Ling Han immediately caught himself, realizing that he couldn't say this to Hao Jing's face. Hao Jing, why did you come here?" He was confident that his precious daughter had no feelings for this man. However, this Hao Jing was definitely interested in his daughter. Thus, he had to take preventative measures. Fuck. This person actually dared to covet his precious little daughter. Hao Jing's expression involuntarily darkened. He was a pseudo-heavenly venerate who was imminently going to ascend to the paramount ranks of the world, yet this person was actually cursing him? However, because of Ling Shi, he naturally couldn't lose his temper. Moreover, he couldn't gauge Ling Han's strength, either, and he could only sense that this person was as vast and boundless as the sea. However, there was no aura around him, and he appeared just like an ordinary person. This was because Ling Han wasn't simply nurturing the powers of dimension inside him like other ordinary heavenly venerates. Instead, he was nurturing these dimensions in each individual cell, forming a myriad of mini-Genesis worlds. These cells combined to form a perfect whole, so it was only natural that not a sliver of power or aura would leak into the surroundings. Of course, this was unless he desired to do so. "Uncle, you really like to tell jokes," Hao Jing said with a smile, clearing up the awkwardness in the air. He then continued, "I also wanted to explore this ancient ruin, and I coincidentally came across junior sister Ling on the way." Ling Han chuckled, and said, "Aren't you a pseudo-heavenly venerate? Is there still any need to go to the ruins of a celestial king? Can this help your cultivation?" Hao Jing involuntarily faltered upon hearing this. However, his reaction was extremely quick, and he immediately replied, "In truth, I especially followed junior sister Ling there. This ruin was left by a ninth heaven celestial king, but junior sister Ling is only at the fourth heaven, so I was worried about her safety." Oh, what flowery words! Not only is he earnest, but also hinting care for Ling Shi's well-being. There's also a hidden expression of love, yet it's done in an extremely natural manner. Even if Ling Shi isn't interested in him, it will still be difficult to reject, no? He's quite experienced at doing this. Ling Han felt an even greater dislike for the young man. How could he hand his daughter over to such a person? "How did it go?" he asked. "Not bad. However, in the end, we triggered a restriction left by the ninth heaven celestial king, and caused the entire ruin to collapse," Hao Jing replied calmly. This was only natural. He was a pseudo-heavenly venerate, so even if the ninth heaven celestial king came back to life, they still wouldn't be able to harm him at all. Not to mention that this was only a restriction placed after their death. Ling Han kept the conversation going with a series of questions, allowing him to learn almost everything he could about Hao Jing. In fact, it could be said that Hao Jing's background was quite astonishing. He was the only son of a fifth-tier heavenly venerate, and he was also quite an extraordinary talent himself. In just 3 billion years, he had already become a pseudo-heavenly venerate. How many people could achieve this? If it had been any other fourth heaven celestial king that had been pursued by Hao Jing like this, perhaps she would have already offered her heart and body to him. However, even though Ling Shi appeared extremely calm and indifferent, she was in fact just as proud as the empress. This kind of prodigy couldn't catch her attention. At the very least, Hao Jing hadn't found a way to catch her attention. Since his daughter didn't like him, Ling Han couldn't be bothered interrogating Hao Jing any further, either. He turned to Ling Shi and asked, "Darling, are you going to come home for a few days this time?" "Sure." Ling Shi replied with a nod. After being apart for so many years, it was indeed time for her to go home and accompany her parents. "All right, then rest up now. We'll set off tomorrow," Ling Han said with a wave. His daughter had just come back from an adventure, so she naturally needed to take a good rest. In fact, Ling Shi also had a small world inside her. Upon activating it, she could possess power that rivaled those at the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. Thus, how could a restriction set by a measly ninth heaven celestial king pose any danger to her? Would she be tired? Would she need to rest? However, one had to remember that Ling Han was a father, one who doted on his daughter like there was no tomorrow. Thus, his actions couldn't be explained with reason. The four of them settled down. However, Hao Jing quickly went to look for Ling Shi. "Junior sister Ling, your parents are quite mighty and intimidating. I was so afraid that I went weak at the knees," Hao Jing purposefully said. Ling Shi smiled faintly, and said, "It's rare for my dad to be so serious. He's actually quite easy to get along with." Hao Jing grumbled in his mind. That was called easy to get along with? Toward her, perhaps. He chuckled, and said, "Under your father's interrogation, I even revealed the time that I stole eggs from a bird's nest when I was young. Oh, that's right, I still don't know your father's name. Ling Shi hesitated for a brief moment. She knew just how much of a trouble magnet Ling Han was. Even now, there were some in the martial academy who wanted to give him a good beating. According to rumors, there were more so hundreds of elites in the Flaming Frost realm who wanted to capture her father. Why did she need to conceal her identity as Ling Han's daughter? This was naturally because Ling Han didn't want those he had offended to take their revenge on her. Ling Shi initially didn't want to say. However, since Hao Jing had already met her father, and since he was also being so earnest, it would be wrong of her to lie to him, even if she didn't accept his feelings. Thus, after thinking over this for a moment, she replied, "My dad's name is Ling Han." "Ling Han?" Hao Jing murmured. He then wore an ashamed expression as he said, "Sorry, junior sister Ling, I've never heard of your father's great name before." Ling Shi didn't mind this. Even though Ling Han's evil name was still talked about in the martial academy, it had indeed already been a long time since those events. The disciples from that time had either already died in battle or already become heavenly venerates and left the martial academy. Thus, there were indeed few students who still knew Ling Han's name. As such, it was no surprise that Hao Jing hadn't heard the legends about Ling Han. However, uncle should be a heavenly venerate, right? Hao Jing asked. Even though his aura was hidden, he still caused me to feel a powerful pressure. Ling Shi nodded, saying, "My dad is a first-tier heavenly venerate." "No wonder," Hao Jing exclaimed as he slapped his thigh. "Auntie is also as beautiful as a fairy, so it's no wonder that she gave birth to an exquisite beauty like junior sister Ling." Ling Shi simply replied with a faint smile. She was naturally a gentle and quiet person, so she didn't feel anything from such words of praise. Hao Jing also knew that his words of flattery had been useless, so he smiled and said, "Junior sister, rest well, I'll take my leave first." Ling Shi politely saw him out. Creak. The door swung shut. Hao Jing's smile slowly disappeared, with a sharp glint appearing in his eyes. "Ling Han. It's actually Ling Han. Who would have thought that I would meet that rumored freak here? However, this is truly an opportunity granted by the heavens," he murmured in a soft voice that only he could hear. Chapter 28-26, 28-26 True Nature Unmasked. Chapter 28-26, 28-26 True Nature Unmasked. 28-26 True Nature Unmasked. "Why are you suddenly smiling so strangely?" the Empress asked. Ling Han wagged his finger and said, "Say, someone's good times truly won't last long." "You discovered something?" the Empress asked. "Not yet. However, I'll keep an eye on him," Ling Han said. He had naturally been worried about his daughter staying in the same room with that unfamiliar man, so he had involuntarily cast his divine sense over. With his power, how could the pseudo-heavenly venerate in Hao Jing notice his presence? Ling Han had heard everything, including Hao Jing's murmurings that Hao Jing thought no one else could hear. Ling Han's senses were far too sharp. He clearly knew who I was, yet he purposefully pretended that he had never heard of me before. Just from this point alone, there's something fishy going on with this brat, Ling Han said. However, I want to see what other tricks he has up his sleeve. The Empress didn't pay much heed to this. She was far too proud, so these matters were naturally not worthy of her attention. They set off again on the next day. They naturally couldn't return to Ling City. Moreover, Ling Han didn't know if the Ling City had been destroyed by those heavenly venerates in their rage. Thus, they picked out a random place to settle and build another Ling City. Heavenly venerates could construct things with just a single thought. Before long, another Ling City appeared before them. Everyone came out from their spatial god tools and spatial celestial tools to do what they needed. In fact, Ling Han hadn't wanted to settle down so quickly. However, in order to probe Hao Jing's true motives, he decided to give him a chance. Of course, it wasn't necessary for him to put in so much effort. He could have directly captured Hao Jing and interrogated him. He was confident that Hao Jing would spill the beans. However, Ling Han decided to do everything in an open and transparent manner, thereby granting Hao Jing a clear and unconfused death. "You're just bored," the Empress remarked, hitting the nail on the head. Ling Han laughed heartily. He was indeed bored, and it was because of this boredom that he decided to play this little game with Hao Jing. Even so, Ling Han naturally wouldn't waste his time. He continued to cultivate while keeping an eye out for any potential heavenly venerable seals appearing at the same time. Even though the Flaming Frost Realm is the only transcendent dimension, the Genesis world is a humongous place, so there are definitely opportunities hidden in every corner, Ling Han said to himself. However, I'm only a single person, so even though I can travel through dimensions, my senses can't do the same. Thus, even if heavenly venerable seals appear in other worlds, I won't hear any news about them. As such, how can I obtain them? Can I create a large number of clones? They don't need to be powerful, and they simply need to act as scouts. Ling Han's heart thumped in excitement. All dimensions had heavenly venerates, and after so many years, it was without a doubt that many of them had passed away. Perhaps they had failed to ascend to a higher level, or perhaps they had fallen in battle. After many years, it was entirely possible that their inheritances would appear. Ling Han was a resolute person, so he immediately started to forge and refine clones. They don't need to be on the level of heavenly venerates, the ninth heaven is good enough. Ling Han felt like his standards were quite low. However, even in the Flaming Frost Realm, ninth heaven celestial kings were still top-notch elites. In Ling Han's eyes, however, they were only good enough. He took a bit of his flesh, and injected into it a sliver of powers of dimension. He then placed within it a tiny bit of his divine sense. Thereupon, a clone was completed. At the end of the day, this is only a rough creation. Even though it's at the ninth heaven, it can only last for 100 million years. After that, the powers of dimension will disappear, and its body will collapse. The sliver of divine sense will return to me, and I'll have to repeat this process again. Ling Han would need to repeat this step once every 100 million years. Even though this was troublesome, it was absolutely worth it when taking into account the importance of the heavenly venerable seals. Ling Han created many clones, after which he started to travel through the dimensions, leaving a clone in each. He only traveled to high-level and medium-level dimensions, ignoring the countless low-level dimensions. This was because low-level dimensions could only produce second-tier heavenly venerates at most, and second-tier heavenly venerates didn't have the power or right to cultivate and produce heavenly venerable seals. Of course, this was apart from freaks like Ling Han. However, Ling Han's strength was at the third tier, and was only obtained by traveling all through the Genesis world. If he had remained at the low-level dimension, how could he have become such a freak? Thus, he wouldn't waste his time scouting the low-level dimensions. After finishing this up, Ling Han returned to Ling City. Even though he had only traveled to under 2,000 dimensions, he had still spent almost 10,000 years away. This was no secret in Ling City. After all, the city lord hadn't appeared all this time. Has Hao Jing done anything out of line? Ling Han asked. No, he's extremely cautious, Hu Niu replied. While away, Ling Han had tasked her with keeping an eye on Hao Jing. In fact, she was the only one capable of it. Such a task was beneath the Empress, while the others weren't powerful enough to accept it. As for Hu Niu, how could she pass on such a fun task? All right, then I'll take over now, Ling Han said with a smile. No, Niu wants to continue playing. Let's do it together, Hu Niu said with eagerness. If other heavenly venerates learned of this, they would definitely accuse Ling Han and Hu Niu of ignoring their proper duties. One was a second-tier heavenly venerate, and the other possessed a battle prowess at the third tier, yet they were locked in a battle with a pseudo-heavenly venerate. Were they not holding him in too high a regard? In fact, Ling Han had nothing better to do at this moment. He continued to cultivate, and his clones had already been dispersed. They would notify him if anything significant occurred. Thus, he needed to do something to occupy his time. Hao Jing was extremely patient and composed, not doing anything to raise suspicion. Moreover, he strictly abided by the rules, and was also very respectful when he interacted with Ling Shi. He simply maintained their relationship as senior brother and junior sister, not rushing at all. However, after 10,000 years, Ling Shi asked if she could return to the martial academy. After all, she couldn't stay home forever, could she? After some brief consideration, Ling Han didn't refute her request. However, he also gave his own condition. That was, she needed to stay for another 10 years. She didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Her father was like a child sometimes, and he was even haggling over something like this. However, she still accepted this condition. A few days later, Hao Jing made his move. He quietly left Ling City, arriving in a forest. He then retrieved a communication seal, and said, "Senior brother Luo, how's the situation on your side?" "I'm about to succeed," a voice replied, carrying a hint of dissatisfaction. "Junior brother Hao, didn't I say? For safety's sake, we shouldn't communicate before I arrive. The situation has changed. She will return to the martial academy in 10 years, so we don't have much time left," Hao Jing said. "You have to arrive before that." "I'll try my best," the person replied. He paused before suddenly chuckling, and saying, "Junior brother Hao, just how enchanting is that mother and daughter duo? You're actually willing to sacrifice a heavenly venerable seal for them? Why don't you give the seal to me? There's no need for you to worry. If you want the heavenly venerable seal, immediately bring that thing over," Hao Jing said in displeasure. All right, who told you to be master's son? My fate is to run around for you," the person said. "Anyhow, I'll go over as quickly as I can." Crackle. The communication seal instantly burst into flames, transforming into ashes. Hao Jing brushed his hands off. This was a special communication seal made by his father, and it could allow him to communicate with his senior brothers and father. "Me. If it weren't for my father cultivating in seclusion, would I leave such benefits to you?" He then turned around to gaze in the direction of Ling City, a coveting expression in his eyes. Whoosh. He rapidly returned to Ling City. After he left, Ling Han and Hunyao appeared from someplace not far away. Hunyao cocked her head and pondered for a moment before suddenly clapping her hands and saying, "Ah, Niao remembers. Around 10,000 years ago, he made contact with that senior brother Luo or whatever, and he told him to look for some blood clay or whatnot. This girl. How is she still so unreliable?" Chapter 28-27, 28-27 Eavesdropping. Chapter 28-27, 2827 Eavesdropping. 2827 Eavesdropping. Ling Han heaved a sigh. Hunyao was still the same Hunyao, and sure enough, she still liked to play and play. He still had to worry about her all the time. Ling Han gazed in the direction of Hao Jing's departure. A cold glint appeared in his eyes. It was because he felt an innate dislike for those who pursued his daughter that he had kept an eye on Hao Jing. However, he hadn't imagined that Hao Jing would be so audacious, not only coveting his daughter, but even coveting the empress. In fact, Hao Jing even had his eyes set on Ling Han's heavenly venerable seals. This Hao Jing is clearly aware of my strength. Thus, he didn't act rashly. Instead, he's requesting backup from this senior brother Luo or whatever. Luo Tongfang? I've heard of him before. He's a first-tier heavenly venerate. However, a first tier clearly isn't powerful enough to rival me, so Luo Tongfang didn't directly come over. Instead, he's gone to look for some blood clay or whatnot. So this thing can wound me or even kill me. Ling Han speculated in his mind. Even though he was brimming with confidence, it wouldn't make sense for him to dive headfirst into danger. Should I capture him now? Hunyao asked in excitement. No, we'll wait for senior brother Luo to arrive before capturing them together, Ling Han said. He unleashed his divine sense across the entire Ling City. No matter how well a first-tier heavenly venerate concealed their aura, he would still be able to immediately detect their presence. Once a heavenly venerate became serious, who could pick on them? 4 years later, Ling Han suddenly felt something tug at his mind. He saw a heavenly venerate entering the city. His disguise was extremely well done, and he had transformed into a speck of dust that lay on a cart of goods entering the city. Only after 2 hours or so did he transform into an ascending origin tier cultivator and walk toward the city west. A cold smile stretched across Ling Han's face. Hao Jing would stay in a tea house in the city's west for a brief while every day. It was clear that the two of them had agreed to meet up there. Ling Han silently made his way over with Hu Niu. Sure enough, this heavenly venerate quickly met up with Hao Jing, entering a private room. They were extremely careful, and they set up a restrictive barrier around the room, preventing their voices from leaking out. Under normal circumstances, even fifth-tier heavenly venerates would be unable to eavesdrop on their discussion. This was unless they forcefully barged in. At that point, however, it couldn't be regarded as eavesdropping anymore. However, it couldn't be helped that it didn't work, because Ling Han had kept an eye on Hao Jing the entire time. Earlier, he had already made preparations around the entire tea house. Thus, even though the two of them had erected a barrier, this had been done on top of Ling Han's previous setup. Thus, it was naturally a futile move. Of course, this was also because Ling Han was far more powerful than them. Otherwise, ignoring Hao Jing, the first-tier heavenly venerate would have definitely noticed something wrong. Anyhow, the two of them were extremely at ease as they began their discussion. Junior brother Hao, it's been quite a few years, and you've already advanced to the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. When Master exits his seclusion, he'll definitely be delighted, the first-tier heavenly venerate said. He was none other than Luo Tongfang, senior brother Luo. Hao Jing chuckled before replying, "Thanks for your congratulations, senior brother Luo. However, a pseudo-heavenly venerate is still only a pseudo. There's no way I can compare to senior brother Luo. Look at you. After becoming a pseudo-heavenly venerate, will advancing to the first tier be far away?" Luo Tongfang said with a smile. How wishy-washy, are they still not going to talk about the proper matters? Hu Niu couldn't help but grumble. Her small fist was tightly clenched, and she continued, "Aren't they afraid of their audiences complaining about drawn-out dialogues? This will cause a mass uproar." Ling Han patted her head, and said, "Have some patience. They could speak freely without having to worry about being overheard by the two people." Sure enough, the other duo moved on to the main topic after a short while. "You've obtained it?" Hao Jing asked, his voice slightly tense and anxious. It was clear that he cared a lot about this matter. "Heh, you pestered me time and time again, so how could I fail?" Luo Tongfang said with a chuckle. "However, is it really necessary to make such a scene against a first tier?" Hao Jing shook his head, saying, "Senior brother Luo, you definitely can't underestimate Ling Han. This is an extraordinary person. Even though he's only at the first tier, he can rival those at the third tier. He's definitely a freak. For real?" Luo Tongfang asked in suspicion. A first tier being able to rival a third tier? Was there anything more preposterous than this in the world? "Senior brother Luo, you were cultivating in seclusion to reach the first tier before, so it's understandable that you're not up to date with all the recent events," Hao Jing said with a nod. "However, I can say with absolute certainty that Ling Han's freakishness is above even my understanding." Luo Tongfang nodded in understanding. Even though he was still doubtful, he knew that Hao Jing wasn't someone to exaggerate matters. Then, will this blood clay be enough to contain him? After hearing all this, it was his turn to become anxious. A cold smile spread across Hao Jing's face. This is the product of a fourth-tier heavenly venerate being taken down by the attack of hysteria. His entire body transformed into a puddle of blood clay, and this is something that possesses a corrosive ability that even my father is extremely afraid of. In other words, even fifth-tier heavenly venerates can be affected. Thus, killing a first tier will be as easy as a flick of the hand. Moreover, as long as a correct amount is used, this blood clay can riddle a heavenly venerate with disease and pain. They have to resist this with all their power, rendering them powerless against others. Luo Tongfang shook his head, saying, "Junior brother, how are you still unable to control your desire and lust for women? Otherwise, your accomplishments would have surpassed mine long ago." Hao Jing chuckled upon hearing this, saying, "Senior brother, if one does nothing but cultivate, what joy is to be had even if you have a limitless lifespan? After we kill Ling Han, you take care of extracting his soul and refining out the heavenly venerable seals. I'll be in charge of rescuing the others. That girl Ling, she will definitely be extremely grateful toward me, yet she won't even guess that her kidnapped mother would have already become my slave, a slave for me to order around and toy with." There was a gleam in Hao Jing's eyes. Luo Tongfang wore an expression of disdain. In fact, he had a very low opinion of this junior brother who had his mind set on nothing but female beauty. However, who told him to be his master's only son? When shall we act? He asked. As soon as possible, Hao Jing replied. I've comprehensively become part of the Ling clan now, so no one will suspect me at all. They won't imagine that I'll poison their food. They're already heavenly venerates, yet they still need to eat. Luo Tongfang asked in surprise. Don't you know? They're a family of gluttons. Outside, Ling Han was already rendered speechless. Normally, people would refer to him as a demon or a freak, but glutton? Sigh. However, Hu Niu roared with laughter, saying, Niu is indeed a glutton. Her expression then immediately became cold, and she said with killing intent, Ling Han, let's go and kill those two baddies. Ling Han nodded in agreement. Sure thing. He had only stayed put because he had wanted to wait for Luo Tongfang to arrive. Now that they were both together, and now that they had revealed their intentions, there was naturally no need for Ling Han to hold back anymore. Hao Jing and Luo Tongfang were still discussing the fine details of their plan when they heard a knock on the door. The two of them exchanged a surprised glance. Who was it? I'll go, Luo Tongfang said as he walked over to answer the door. The door creaked open, revealing a young man and an indescribably beautiful young girl. You are? He asked. He was still disguised as an ascending origin tier cultivator at this moment, so the aura that he exuded wasn't especially powerful. However, Hao Jing could see the visitors clearly, and his expression involuntarily underwent a drastic change. Ling Han, he stammered. He was just discussing how to kill Ling Han, yet his target had suddenly appeared in the doorway. How could he not be shocked? Boom! Luo Tongfang immediately unleashed his cultivation, with his vast aura as a first tier instantly sweeping into the surroundings like a chaotic tidal wave. Chapter 28-28, 28-28 Bloodclay. Chapter 28-28, 28-28 Bloodclay. 28-28 Bloodclay. Ling Han, is it? I've been looking forward to meeting you for a long time, Luo Tongfang said. He had recovered his aura as a first tier, and he was speaking with extreme confidence at this moment. Heavenly Venerates, which of them wasn't a supreme prodigy? With both being at the first tier, who would be weaker than the other? Thus, even though Luo Tongfang approved of Hao Jing's method to poison the Lings using bloodclay, he was still an extremely proud person at heart. He was confident that he could suppress Ling Han even without resorting to such underhanded methods. Peng. However, Hao Jing's next move was something that Luo Tongfang hadn't anticipated at all. He directly blasted a hole in the wall before shooting out and fleeing into the distance. Luo Tongfang was absolutely infuriated. Hao Jing's actions were a clear sign that he didn't believe in Luo Tongfang's ability to defeat Ling Han. In fact, they implied that Luo Tongfang didn't even possess the right to rival Ling Han. It was because of this that Hao Jing had fled so quickly. Fuck. Luo Tongfang was infuriated to death, and he glared at Ling Han with a baleful expression. He imagined the moment that he decapitated Ling Han and tossed his head before Hao Jing. Just what expression would Hao Jing wear? Oi, don't let your mind wander, Ling Han said with a smile. He didn't pursue Hao Jing, because Hu Niu had already gone after him. Could a pseudo-heavenly venerate flee from the clutches of a second-tier heavenly venerate? Did they think that everyone was Ling Han? Ling Han, at the same cultivation level, Luo Tongfang, won't lose to anyone, Luo Tongfang said with confidence. Oh, Ling Han replied with a nod. Do you have any last words? Die. Luo Tongfang roared as he unleashed an attack. Wang. A heavenly venerable seal immediately pulsated in his hand. This was one of the more widely known 7 seals, and it could raise his power fourfold. At the same time, he channeled a secret technique, with a bloody wolf materializing behind him and howling at the sky, summoning a bloody moon that radiated with a boundless sense of desolation and misery. Boom! The blood wolf swallowed the moon, and Luo Tongfang also charged over at the same time, with his right hand transforming into a wolf paw as it shot over with a destructive might. Ling Han shook his head, and responded with a casual swat. Pa. This strike was unstoppable, and Luo Tongfang's outstretched arm was the first to shatter. Ling Han's palm then struck his chest, its explosive might instantly crushing it into pieces. Luo Tongfang wore an expression of utter shock, awash with disbelief as he stared at Ling Han. Peng. His entire body collapsed into pieces, completely dismembered. They were both first-tier heavenly venerates, yet he was actually unable to withstand a single strike from Ling Han. He finally understood why Hao Jing fled with such resoluteness upon seeing Ling Han. This was because he knew that they were no match for Ling Han. The gulf between them was like the gulf between heaven and earth. His expression was spiritless and dazed. They were both at the first tier, so how was he so much weaker than Ling Han? Ling Han naturally wouldn't care about Luo Tongfang's thoughts. He quickly retrieved a spatial celestial tool from Luo Tongfang's body before examining it with his divine sense and extracting a jade vial. He felt an instinctive apprehension toward the matter inside the vial. This was something that he definitely didn't want to touch. This was the flesh of a heavenly venerate that had been corroded by hysteria. Ling Han carefully unplugged the vial, only to see wisps of black air drifting out and forming all sorts of shapes. However, these shapes were all of poisonous creatures such as spiders and centipedes. He squatted down next to Luo Tongfang's decapitated head. With his power suppressing Luo Tongfang was completely unable to knit his body back together and heal his wounds. "Get that thing away from me," Luo Tongfang cried in astonishment, his face filled with terror. He appeared even more tense and terrified than when he had been blasted into pieces by Ling Han just then. By the looks of it, this thing was truly extraordinary. This was clear just by looking at Luo Tongfang's terrified expression. Ling Han chuckled and said, "Since you're so terrified of it, then why did you bring it all the way here? And you even wanted to feed it to me. Say, even though I'm a glutton, I'm not an absolute fool, am I? Did you really think I would eat this?" If Hao Jing truly acted out his plan, he would have definitely used some method to cover the aura of this thing so that no one could notice any problem. Of course, he definitely didn't dare to say this. "Friend, I was also deceived by others, so please spare me this one time," he begged as he clenched his teeth. As a heavenly venerate, it took him a great deal of courage to utter these words, with his face bright red with shame. Ling Han involuntarily laughed, saying, "Others bring small presents from hundreds of miles away, the present trifling but the thoughts and feelings deep. Meanwhile, you've brought me poison from tens of thousands of kilometers away. What should this be classified as?" Luo Tongfang was rendered speechless. Right now, his only saving grace was that the main culprit was Hao Jing, while he had only been responsible for bringing some things over. "I genuinely didn't know about my junior brother's plans at all," he said. Ling Han poured out a bit of the content from the vial, the black blood clay. He then spread it on one of Luo Tongfang's arms. Theoretically speaking, the arm of a heavenly venerate would remain healthy and undecaying even if it were severed. However, after coming into contact with the blood clay, it instantly started to decay and rot before eventually transforming into a puddle of blood. How poisonous! Ling Han looked at Luo Tongfang, simply shaking his head without speaking. "Ling Han, Niu has captured him." Peng. Hu Niu jumped in, a person in her hand. It was none other than Hao Jing. How could a pseudo-heavenly venerate possibly escape from a second-tier heavenly venerate? Pa. Hu Niu tossed Hao Jing to the ground. Ling Han smiled and said, "The first time I saw you, I said that good times don't last long. By the looks of it, my prediction was indeed correct." Hao Jing gritted his teeth, vexation on his face. He didn't know where he had gone wrong. In all these years, his behavior had been normal and unsuspicious. He hadn't left any flaw at all. He wore a wry and aggrieved smile as he asked, "How did you see through me?" Ling Han didn't keep any secrets, and he explained the entire process. Hao Jing was almost angered to death. He had actually lost to Ling Han's love for his daughter. "You daughter-doting freak. Your daughter is already a celestial king, yet you're still so worried about her." He was filled with bitter resentment. It wasn't he who had made a mistake, and it wasn't that he was careless. Instead, It was Ling Han who was a fucking daughter-doting freak. It was because of this that Ling Han had coincidentally noticed something off about him. He was filled with resentment. Utter resentment. There's no need to feel so vexed and aggrieved. Even if you weren't targeting my darling daughter, did you really think that a first tier and a pseudo-heavenly venerate could defeat 3 heavenly venerates? Moreover, the 3 heavenly venerates are at the 3rd tier and 2nd tier, Ling Han said with a shake of his head. Hao Jing had truly been dreaming. This blood clay was indeed very impressive. However, would it be any easy task to poison him with it? I admit defeat. Hao Jing hung his head and said, "What do you want from me?" Ling Han was astonished. "You really believe I will spare you if you give me something in exchange?" Hao Jing humphed and said, "My father is Hao Tianjun, a 5th tier heavenly venerate. If you kill me, my father will find and kill you no matter where you flee and hide." Ling Han pondered for a moment before murmuring, "Have I killed the son of a 5th tier heavenly venerate before?" After a moment, he shook his head and said, "I've killed far too many people, so I genuinely can't recall. No matter, after killing you, I would have definitely killed the son of a 5th tier heavenly venerate." You. Hao Jing was astounded. This wasn't anything to be proud of, so why was Ling Han acting as if it were? He hurriedly said, "Aren't you afraid of my father seeking revenge?" "Heh, even if I were afraid, do you think I'd forgive a vermin who targeted my family?" Ling Han said with a shake of his head. "Trash like you is better off dying early and reincarnating early." Peng. With a single punch, Hao Jing was instantly smashed into minced meat. Chapter 28-29, 28-29 The world has immersed in chaos. Chapter 28-29, 28-29 The world has immersed in chaos. 28-29 The world has immersed in chaos. Luo Tongfang was covered in cold sweat, though it was only his head now that could sweat. Hao Jing had been killed just like that, so could he be spared? He was a great heavenly venerate, a being that even the heavens had to respect, yet now his life was in the hands of another, and could be decided with just a single thought, so how could he not panic? Whatever dangers he had faced in the past, he had known that he would have been able to live through them. As long as he still had his strength, there would be hope. Yet now, he did not have the slightest idea as to what to do, and could only wait till death took him. He did have some backbone, though, and knowing that there was no way Ling Han would spare his life, he simply chose not to beg for mercy. Ling Han delivered a casual palm strike, and Luo Tongfang's head was also smashed. This kind of man naturally could not be spared. Sigh, nothing to play with again. Hunyo pouted. Ling Han patted her head. There are many more things that are fun to play with. We'll find something else in the future. Ling Han, let's go and have a baby. Hunyo's eyes shone brightly, and dragged Ling Han off with her without letting him get a word in. On the next day, Ling Han told the Empress about what happened, which naturally caused the Empress to fly into a thunderous fury, and she wanted nothing more than to further torture Hao Jing's corpse. Meanwhile, she was kept in the dark. She went back to the martial academy alone. As for Hao Jing, Ling Han told her that the former had long since left, and would not be going back with her so that the little girl would not accidentally have a slip of the tongue. Hao Jing's father is still in seclusion, but when he comes out of seclusion, he will definitely seek revenge, bewitching Maiden Ru said. The Empress said, with the power of a heavenly venerate, added with the link of a bloodline relation, he should very easily be able to find his way here. Ling Han nodded. We should leave again. It was fine. In the first place, this Ling city was built to show Hao Jing, and Ling Han had no plans to stay here for long at all. Hence, he sent out a missive, and they set out again a month later, heading somewhere else. This time, Ling Han really settled down. He'd found a very peaceful, quiet place, surrounded by beautiful mountains and rivers, with picturesque scenery. He cultivated here for over 100,000 years, and became restless again. Ling Han's progress was too slow if he was cultivating so peacefully like this. Who knew how much time he would need to reach the 7th tier like this? He did not sense any waves coming from his clones, and it was really extremely boring. Hence, he, the Empress, and Hunyo set out, going off to find the large black dog. This large black dog was great at making trouble, and perhaps there would be something fun going on with him. The three of them first went to the martial academy, and met Ling Zhenxue. After they had some father-son talk, Ling Han asked about the whereabouts of the large black dog. It was truly coincidental. The large black dog was looking for Ling Han as well, but he did not know where he should go, so he was simply waiting here instead. Damn dog, if you are deliberately waiting for me, it must be for nothing good, isn't it? Ling Han asked. Not only is it nothing good, practically something major has happened, and the world is almost doomed. The large black dog jumped up and down. What is it? Even if the heavens are falling down on us, wouldn't there be someone taller that would keep them aloft? Ling Han asked laughingly. Don't remind me. Now, it is these taller guys that are causing trouble. The large black dog sighed. Tell me in more detail. Ling Han's expression also became serious. It is all because the threat from hysteria is removed. Now, the selfish, evil nature in everyone's bones has been exposed, the large black dog said. Ling Han glanced at the damn dog. Are you talking about yourself? The large black dog gave him the middle finger, and then said, without an external threat, what is left is naturally only internal strife. Previously, there were already supreme prodigies that had disappeared for no reason, but now it has become worse. A considerable number of heavenly venerates have directly allied together, publicly killing other heavenly venerates, and stealing their heavenly venerable seals. Ling Han was finally shocked at this, and exclaimed, something like that actually happened. Aren't they afraid at all? The 7th-tier heavenly venerates were all at the realm battlefield, but there were still other 6th-tier heavenly venerates like Zhu Heng, Chu Hao, and Lin Xiaoyang. Would they allow something like this to happen? What would they be afraid of? Do you know? It was a 6th-tier heavenly venerate that started this. The large black dog shook his head. Who was it? The heavenly venerate 10,000 Shadows, the large black dog replied. This old geezer gathered a large group of people, and they slaughtered other heavenly venerates as they liked. He seems to be certain that those 7th-tier heavenly venerates would not be able to extract themselves. Now, everyone is afraid for themselves, and a great many heavenly venerates have been forced to form alliances. Some forces have even begun to hunt down other heavenly venerates just like the 10,000 Shadows Alliance. Grandpa Dog was in such a rush to find you because I wanted to tell you that you would definitely become a target because you possess more than one heavenly venerable seal. You must be extremely careful, the large black dog said very solemnly. Ling Han nodded. He could freely traverse through the dimensions, and this was his greatest trump card. However, this trump card could not be used freely. If he encountered hysteria, that would be even more terrifying than meeting a 7th tier. Ling Han, should we also cozy up to someone powerful? The large black dog suggested. We can't trust others, but there is definitely no problem with Zhu Heng, Chu Hao, and the others, so why don't we go and find them? Ling Han thought for a while, and then said, I do indeed have to meet with Zhu Heng and the other seniors and find out what they think about this matter. The trio set out together along with the large black dog, heading for the ancestral grounds of the Lin clan. They didn't know about Zhu Heng and Chu Hao, but Lin Xiaoyang should be standing guard there. When they arrived at the Lin clan, they could see that it was heavily guarded, as if they were faced with a great enemy. Who goes there? Immediately, someone shouted at Ling Han. Ling Han. I have come especially to meet with Lord Lin Xiaoyang, Ling Han said. After a while, a man streaked out from the mountains, and landed in front of Ling Han. He took a close look at Ling Han and his group, and only then did he clasp his hands in greeting. Lord Ling, please do not fault me for my rudeness, but it is not an ordinary time now, and I have no choice but to be careful. Ling Han nodded. I understand. Even as powerful as the Lin clan was, they had to be on such high alert. It was clear proof just how chaotic the world had become. Their group was invited into the Lin clan, and not long afterwards, Lin Piaoxue appeared, taking them to meet Lin Xiaoyang. After so many years, she, too, had advanced to the 2nd tier. Her progress was extremely fast. Greetings, Lord Lin. When they saw Lin Xiaoyang, everyone clasped their hands in greeting. Lin Xiaoyang nodded. I know why you have come. My lord, We all suspect that Hysteria has deliberately created this energy storm, causing us to kill each other. Then, why do you not stop all this from happening? Ling Han asked. The large black dog hurriedly signaled at him with his eyes. This was a 6th-tier elite. Was he someone that you could demand answers from? Lin Xiaoyang did not treat this as insubordination. He sighed. Do you know just how many 6th tiers there are in the world in total? Ling Han's eyes narrowed involuntarily. How many? A total of 307, Lin Xiaoyang replied. Though I, Junior Brother Ju, and Junior Brother Chu are coordinating with our full efforts, the mere power of just the 3 of us is completely not enough to end this internal strife. Then, there must be someone that is fanning the flames. Otherwise, this kind of situation could not have just appeared arbitrarily, Ling Han said. Would it be that heavenly venerate 10,000 shadows? Lin Xiaoyang shook his head. We have also gone to find 10,000 shadows, but according to the information that we have obtained, 10,000 shadows is actually not the main culprit. For the moment, the person who is manipulating things from within the shadows is still concealed deeply. Could it be that this person has secretly collaborated with Hysteria, and become its lackey? Ling Han was extremely surprised. To be able to cause such great trouble, the culprit had to be a 6th tier, at least, but was it possible for a 6th tier elite not to have even this bit of awareness, and actually cooperate with Hysteria? Chapter 2830, 2830 Alliance Through Marriage? Chapter 2830, 2830 Alliance Through Marriage? 2830 Alliance Through Marriage? Lin Xiaoyang shook his head. He was also very confused by this. Logically speaking, anyone with the slightest bit of sense should know that working together with Hysteria would be making a deal with the devil. The final result would definitely mean tragedy for himself as well, because Hysteria's goal was to devour the entire Genesis world and replace it, becoming that supreme existence capable of controlling everything. But if there had been no one stoking the flames, would things have progressed to this extent? Even 6th tiers like Lin Xiaoyang, Zhu Heng, and Chu Hao could not find this main culprit, so what more could Ling Han do? The 6th tier elites that he knew were only limited to Lin Xiaoyang and the others. He could not suspect the 3 of them, right? The outside world is chaotic, so just stay here for the moment, Lin Xiaoyang said. Ling Han gave it some consideration, and accepted Lin Xiaoyang's kind offer. The word outside was indeed chaotic, and without the appearance of any heavenly venerable seals, there was no need for him to run here and there, so what did it matter where he cultivated? Thank you, Senior. Ling Han moved, and relocated everyone from Ling City to here. He also found some means to inform the Rain Emperor and the others, who were still roaming around on their travels. When everyone arrived, they built a new city in the vicinity of the Lin clan. It felt good to benefit from the protection and favor of a more powerful supporter. Though this place was still more than 5,000 kilometers away from Lin clan, it was completely within the Lin clan's range of protection, and was even in the central area at that. Hence, who would dare to attack them? Even if everyone was certain that there was not a single 7th tier heavenly venerate that could extract himself and return from the realm battlefield, as long as a 7th tier heavenly venerate was still alive, who would dare to touch their place of enlightenment? After everything was settled, Ling Han began to cultivate in seclusion. Since he could not obtain more heavenly venerable seals, he could only use a great amount of time to improve the rate of his cultivation. Time passed very quickly, and soon 100 million years had passed. For heavenly venerates, 100 million years was actually not very long. In fact, this actually could only be considered just a slightly longer period of time even for celestial kings. However, a great many things had happened in these 100 million years. A great number of heavenly venerates were slaughtered because heavenly venerable seals caused a large-scale hunting down of heavenly venerates. To say nothing of 4th tiers and 5th tiers, even 6th tier heavenly venerates were in danger. This was no false alarm. There were at least 3 6th tier heavenly venerates that had been besieged and killed, dying helplessly. When the news spread out, the whole world was shaken. What was a 6th tier? Aside from the 7th tier, there was no one stronger than them, and now those 7th tiers were all fighting against Hysteria in the realm battlefield. Under such circumstances, even sixth tiers had died, so how could this not be shocking? No one knew exactly how those 3 sixth tiers had died. Some deduced that they had died because they had been ganged up on by over a dozen other sixth tiers, and some guesses were even wilder, saying that there had to have been a 7th tier that had secretly taken action, and that was what had led to those 3 sixth tiers not even having the chance to flee. There had never been any solution to this. Hence, this caused all the great heavenly venerates to be even more uneasy, fearing for themselves. According to incomplete statistics, the number of heavenly venerates that had died in the last 100 million years had reached around 20%, which was many more than the wartime casualties at the realm battlefield. Zhu Heng and Chu Hao had also relocated their own clansmen here. The 3 great 6th tier elites were standing guard here together. At other times, a single 6th tier would be enough to suppress the ages, but the present circumstances were different. Even 6th tiers would have to gather together to protect one another because other 6th tiers had already joined in alliance, and solitary 6th tiers would only be eliminated one by one. In truth, even with the combined forces of 3 great 6th tier heavenly venerates, it was not all that safe. In other heavenly venerable tier alliances, the number of 6th tier heavenly venerates was at least 7 or 8 and more than a dozen at most. Hence, Lin Xiaoyang, Chu Hao, and Zhu Heng were still looking for new allies. However, the 3 of them were apprentice brothers, so they naturally could trust each other completely, but mere trust was a hard barrier to overcome if they wanted to take in a 4th person into their alliance. Moreover, other 6th tiers would also find it very hard to trust the 3 of them. After all, the 3 of them were a unit, so newcomers would fear that the 3 of them would turn on and screw them over with their combined efforts. Precisely because of this, Lin Xiaoyang and the others were still looking for allies after 100 million years had passed. Ling Han came out of seclusion, and after finding out about the details of the situation, he began another extended period of cultivation in seclusion. He did not like to live under someone else's protection, and there was only one thing that could ensure being able to have peace and safety in this chaotic world: strength. At the beginning, Ling Han would come out of seclusion once every 200 to 300 million years, and then over 1 billion years, to find out what the situation was. However, the feedback he obtained every time was more or less the same: there was another great number of heavenly venerates that had been slaughtered. It was as if heavenly venerates had become common vegetables that could be reaped at will. Thankfully, with the combined guard of the 3 great 6th tiers, added with the intimidation of Lin Luo, a 7th tier, it was extremely safe here all this while. There had not been one person that attacked them. However, no one knew how much longer this safety and peace could last. After over 10 billion years, Ling Han finally advanced his cultivation level to the late stage of the 1st tier. He firmed his resolve. In his next period of seclusion, he would not come out unless he had attained the 2nd tier. 1 billion years, 5 billion years, 10 billion years. Time passed swiftly, and in a flash, more than 20 billion years had already passed. Ling City had long since developed, and the Rain Emperor, Yi, and the other elites had also returned one after another. Afterwards, even Ji Wuming, Hua Furong, and Shichanzi had joined Ling City. After all, they all came from the celestial realm, so they naturally would come together in the face of danger. Ling Han had been in seclusion all this while, which made the Empress and Hu Niu feel very bored, so they, too, began their own seclusion. Hence, after the passing of many generations, the newer generations did not know that there were such people like Ling Han and the Empress at all. They only knew heavenly venerates like the Rain Emperor, Yi, Ji Wuming, the large black dog, and the others. Just at this time, great news spread out. The Rong clan and Ying clan would be joining in alliance with the Lin clan, Zhu clan, and Chu clan. The ancestor of the Rong clan, Rong Tianyu, and the ancestor of the Ying clan, Ying Zhuoyang, were both 6th tier elites. Once they allied together with Lin Xiaoyang and the others, their strength would definitely greatly increase, which would greatly improve their level of security. Rong Yang, a 4th tier heavenly venerate, the son of Rong Tianyu, had cultivated for 7 epochs, advancing from the celestial king tier to heavenly venerable tier, and then attaining 4th tier. Though he was not as heaven-defying as Lin Yolian and Xin Chihu, he was frighteningly steady, and had similarly shown his astonishing natural talent in cultivation. And now, Rong Yang was here on behalf of his father, visiting the Lin clan to discuss the details of their alliance. Ling City could just barely be considered a part of Lin clan, so they naturally had heard of this as well. It is said that Rong Yang would marry Lin Piaoxue and affirm their alliance through matrimony. Hiss, celestial maiden Piaoxue is going to marry? Heavens, I am about to collapse. What are you collapsing for? Even if Lady Lin Piaoxue does not marry Rong Yang, don't tell me that she would marry you instead. Fuck, can't I even think about it? This news from afar had already reached Ling City, causing many people to discuss it spiritedly. The addition of a new 6th-tier Heavenly Venerate as an ally was shocking news. And amidst these heated discussions, a young man had also arrived at Ling City. His name was Rong Xingquan. I heard that the master of Ling City, Ling Han, has obtained a Heavenly Venerable seal before. Rong Xingquan asked the person beside him. If Ling Han was present, he would be able to recognize this man immediately. Zhouwu Heavenly Venerate. Zhouwu Heavenly Venerate nodded. In the realm battlefield, Ling Han has indeed obtained a Heavenly Venerable seal. When he said these words, a sliver of cruelty flashed in his eyes. Chapter 2831, 2831 The Arrogant Rong Xingquan. Chapter 2831, 2831 The Arrogant Rong Xingquan. 2831 The Arrogant Rong Xingquan. Among those Heavenly Venerates that originated from the Celestial Realm, it was Zhouwu Heavenly Venerate who had accomplished the least. Wu Le had almost reached the 2nd tier in the Celestial Realm, and he had shot sky high after coming to the Flaming Frost Realm, having advanced to the 4th tier not too long ago. After all, while the Celestial Realm was indeed small, those able to attain 1st tier in the Celestial Realm were actually all prodigies of the highest tier. Green Flames was only slightly weaker, and had long since reached peak stage 3rd tier. It was possible that he would break through at any moment. Meanwhile, Sealed Emotion was even more domineering, having actually cultivated a Heavenly Venerable seal that was his own. Though his present cultivation level was not as high as Wu Le's, he might be able to surpass him in the future despite his slower start. It was even possible that his final accomplishment could be the 5th tier. At present, the Karmic Life Heavenly Venerable had just advanced to the 3rd tier, but he had started from the Celestial King tier. Being able to become a Heavenly Venerate in such a short period of time, the amount of strength he had was imaginable. As for Zhouwu Heavenly Venerate, he had long since advanced to the 3rd tier, but after so many years, he was still stuck in the early stage of the 3rd tier, and did not improve much at all. In comparison, he paled despondently. It was turbulent times now, and Zhouwu Heavenly Venerate could not mind his own business and stay away from trouble, so he could only lower himself to join under the banner of Rong Tianyu. Originally, it would have been very, very hard for him to cross paths with Ling Han again, but who would have imagined that Rong Tianyu would actually ally with the Lin clan? Hence, he also had the good luck to come along with the group of representatives this time. Rong Xingquan was Rong Yang's cousin. He was far from being as freakish as Rong Yang, but with his powerful background, he had also cultivated to the height of 9th heaven. His personality was quite self-centered. After Zhouwu Heavenly Venerate arrived at Lin clan, and found out that Ling Han was nearby, an idea came to him, and he began to egg Rong Xingquan on. What kind of person was Rong Xingquan? He was completely self-centered, and thinking that his uncle was a 6th-tier elite, practically invincible in this world, he naturally considered everyone else below him. He did not dare to trifle with those like the Lin clan and Chu clan, but what was the Ling clan worth? The strongest among them was only a 2nd-tier Heavenly Venerate, so how could he possibly care? He only had to send out Zhouwu Heavenly Venerate, and that would be enough to conquer all of them. He wanted to snatch Ling Han's Heavenly Venerable seal, and hand it over to Rong Yang to gain the favor of this cousin of his. After all, he knew that he was far less important than Rong Yang in Rong Tianyu's heart, so he naturally had to work hard to gain his cousin's favor. Who knew, perhaps great luck might fall on him, and he would be able to step into Heavenly Venerable tier, right? Hence, with Zhouwu Heavenly Venerate egging him on, he came. Rong Xingquan crossed his arms behind him, and strode in front, while Jowu Heavenly Venerate followed closely behind. All this while, he stayed half a step behind him, which made Rong Xingquan very pleased. What he did not know was, with how overwhelmingly proud a Heavenly Venerate was, how could he possibly bow his head in front of a ninth heaven? Jowu Heavenly Venerate was merely using him, and his purpose was naturally to have Rong Xingquan to stand out. With Rong Xingquan's arrogance, added with Ling Han's temper, the result would definitely be exceedingly terrible. Who knew, this idiot could be directly killed. At that time, Rong Yang would definitely interfere. Was a fourth-tier Heavenly Venerate still not enough to suppress a mere Ling city? Worse come to worst, even if Rong Yang was unable to deal with Ling city, something only had to happen to him, and a sixth tier would be angered. Ling Han would definitely be killed. Ling Han's location was naturally no secret, and was easily found out just by asking anyone. Hence, Rong Xingquan and Jowu Heavenly Venerate soon located him. Rong Xingquan revealed a smile of disdain. He strode forwards, heading for the main doors. "Sir, who are you looking for?" There were naturally guards at the entrance into Ling Manor, and they immediately asked Rong Xingquan. Because Ling Han very much disliked overbearing, condescending behavior, the servants of Ling Manor were very polite, and would not act arrogant just because there were 3 Heavenly Venerates in residence. Yet Rong Xingquan did not acknowledge them at all. Thinking that he was the nephew of a 6th-tier Heavenly Venerate, he thought that everyone in the world should treat him respectfully. Hence, he merely glanced condescendingly at the guard, and then demanded, "Tell Ling Han to come out and receive me on bent knee." When the guard heard this, he was instantly outraged. It was true that the servants of the Ling clan did not have the bad habit of being overbearing and arrogant, but they also did not have the habit of letting someone else trample all over them. Who did not know what kind of temper Ling Han had? As long as his own people had no fault, he would fully support them, and would show no fear no matter whom he was facing. Moreover, Rong Xingquan directly insulted Ling Han from the moment he opened his mouth this time, so how could this guard not feel furious? He immediately drew out a spear, aimed straight for Rong Xingquan, and said menacingly, "Immediately apologize, and withdraw your previous word. A mere servant actually dares to make demands of me?" Rong Xingquan scoffed. He stretched out his hand to suppress that guard. The guard hurriedly countered, but he was only an ascending origin tier, so how could he possibly match a 9th heaven? Pa! Rong Xingquan's power took the form of a giant black hand that grabbed that guard. "Beg for mercy, and I can spare your life," Rong Xingquan declared arrogantly. P2E. Yet that guard spat at Rong Xingquan, but how could this possibly reach Rong Xingquan? His spit was blocked by a protective light shield. "You are courting death." Rong Xingquan raised a brow, killing intent spreading out in all directions. With a mere thought, that giant black hand immediately tightened its hold. Pa! That guard was instantly squeezed to burst, turning into a mush of blood. "Trash that overestimated his own abilities," he said condescendingly, and strode towards the main doors. "Who goes there? To actually dare kill in the Ling Manor?" A man shot down in front of him. Rong Xingquan glanced at him, and then asked, "You are Ling Han?" He had seen what Ling Han looked like before, and it was this appearance that was in front of him. However, the other's cultivation level looked to only be the 9th heaven. "I am Ling Hua," this person said. His eyes swept over the surroundings, and immediately discovered the guard's blood that had not completely fallen down. His expression became severe, and after some slight sensing, he immediately grabbed the remnants of that guard's soul. Everything that had happened previously appeared in his mind's eye. He couldn't help but be furious. This man had come to their Ling clan, and just killed someone indiscriminately. Just how arrogant could he be? Ling Hua was the manifestation of one of the 9 source powers of heaven and earth that Ling Han had previously obtained and later set free one after another, allowing them to gain self-consciousness. A source power of heaven and earth had the advantage of a source power. By nature, they had the unique trait of the celestial king tier, but their limitations were also very apparent. Because they were nurtured from the heaven and earth, it was naturally impossible that they could surpass regulations, so 9th heaven celestial king tier was the highest peak they could reach. It was impossible that they could surpass this level and become heavenly venerates. "How dare you?" Ling He exclaimed menacingly. Previously, the 9 of them had been roaming around in the world, and only until after they had attained 9th heaven and could not advance any further had they come to the Ling clan, and established themselves as Ling Han's followers. Hence, he was naturally furious right now. Rong Xingquan revealed an expression of disdain. Nothing but a mere servant, and he actually dared to spit at me. How could it be that he did not deserve to die? Your surname is Ling. What relation do you have with Ling Han? Never mind, I could care less. Go and call Ling Han to come out and greet me on bent knee. Aside from feeling furious, Ling He also felt an urge to break into laughter. A mere 9th heaven celestial king actually dared demand a first-tier heavenly venerate come out to receive him on bent knee? It would be better for you to obediently let me apprehend you, and wait quietly to be dealt with. He launched his attack, intending to apprehend Rong Xingquan. He was not afraid of starting a battle here, because this was a place that had been refined by several heavenly venerates. Every single brick had a condensed sliver of power of a heavenly venerate, and was definitely not something that could crumble from a battle between 9th heaven celestial kings. Chapter 2832, 2832 Too much nonsense. Chapter 2832, 2832 Too much nonsense. 2832 Too much nonsense. Ling He moved. He was the source fire of heaven and earth in human form, and now he had cultivated to the 9th heaven, so his first move was the highest grade of regulations of fire. As he delivered his punch, power condensed, turning into a giant flaming fist that descended on Rong Xingquan. Party tricks. Rong Xingquan said disdainfully, stretching out a hand to parry this oncoming blow. Peng. The 2 men exchanged blows, and they were both shaken. Regulations turned into a violent force that spread out in all directions, turning into a terrifying shock wave. Thankfully, this was the Ling manner. Every single brick and stone had been refined, and was extremely sturdy, unafraid of this kind of powerful impact. Otherwise, not only would the Ling manor be destroyed, even the whole Ling city would be ruined. Yi, you actually do have some strength. Rong Xingquan showed a hint of surprise. Originally, he had intended to subdue his opponent with a single blow. He had not imagined that Ling He would be unexpectedly powerful. This was natural. He was a source power of heaven and earth in human form, and had cultivated to peak stage 9th heaven at that, so how could he not be powerful? Ling He roared, and instantly charged back towards Rong Xingquan. Peng, peng, peng. The 2 of them fought fiercely, yet it was hard to determine who was stronger. Rong Xingquan felt slightly embarrassed. He had always considered himself as a descendant of a super powerful force, yet he was actually unable to suppress a mere guard of Ling City. How could he accept this? Xiao, xiao, xiao. Several other figures shot over, yet they all practically looked the same. They were Ling Mu, Ling Tu, and the other source powers of heaven and earth. Little Fire, do you need help? Ling Shuai asked smilingly. No need, I alone can suppress him. Ling He declared. He had anger bottled up in him. What a joke. Even if you all attack together, how would you be able to suppress me? Rong Xingquan was extremely furious. He inhaled softly, and his whole body immediately glowed as his battle prowess instantly spiked at least 10 times over, filled with a frightening oppressive power. Instantly, the pressure on Ling He became extraordinarily heavy, and he fell into a disadvantage. This was because Rong Xingquan was using a heavenly venerate technique, so his battle prowess naturally soared. We attack together. Ling Tu and the others naturally would not just stand by and watch as Ling He was defeated or even killed, and they all charged. This was not a fair one-on-one battle. Instead, it was Rong Xingquan that had taken the initiative to come and provoke the Ling manor. What need was there for them to be concerned about fair play? They just had to kill him. So what if you are attacking together? In front of me, people like you are all trash. Rong Xingquan laughed loudly. His hands waved quickly, and boundless power surged out, turning into one mysterious seal after another. In a short period of time, his battle prowess had reached an extremely terrifying level. There was no way a 9th heaven celestial king could channel a heavenly venerate technique for a long period of time. Ordinarily, it would be around 2 hours or so, but in this period of time, a ninth heaven celestial king could unleash battle prowess that was close to the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. This was utterly terrifying. Though Ling Hua and the others were working together, they were still being suppressed by Rong Xingquan. They could not turn their disadvantage around no matter how hard they tried. After several hundred moves, Rong Xingquan threw out a heavy punch, and instantly sent Ling Hua and the others flying, causing them to throw up copious amounts of blood and lose the ability to battle any further. Thankfully, they were all formed from the source powers of heaven and earth, and had incredibly tenacious vitality. They would not be dying so easily. Trash will be trash. Rong Xingquan sneered as he suppressed the boiling sensation in his chest. After using a heavenly venerate technique for so long, the backlash on him was actually very serious as well, but he was stubbornly clinging to his pride, and would not show his weakness no matter the cost. Ling Hua and the others could say nothing in response. A loss was a loss. Rong Xingquan laughed loudly. His eyes swept over his surroundings. At this time, a great many people had come out of the Ling Manor as well, but they were all servants of the manor. There were not even many celestial kings among them, so it was naturally impossible that they could be Rong Xingquan's match. "Aren't you going to tell Ling Han to come out and receive me on bent knee?" Rong Xingquan regained his arrogant, overbearing demeanor. "Father is still in seclusion, and has no time to meet any visitors." A sweet voice rang out. An exquisite beauty had walked out, 9 ribbons of iridescent light wrapped around her, showing that she was a ninth heaven celestial king. This was Ling Shi. She had actually long since cultivated to the ninth heaven, but to strengthen her foundations, and walk the path that her parents had to become the strongest heavenly venerate, she was tempering her mindset, and when the time came, she would travel from one dimension to the next. Rong Xingquan glanced over, and his eyes involuntarily shone brilliantly. Beautiful, too beautiful. Though he had had a taste of various types of beautiful women, he had never seen one as beautiful as this woman that was in front of him now. Furthermore, this woman was as pure as a pool of clear water. The mere sight of her brought comfort. "And who are you?" he asked. His attitude was still arrogant. Even the most beautiful woman was only something to add flavor to his life in his eyes. It was impossible that he would dote on any woman like a precious treasure. Though Ling Shi was already angered, she did not display this outwardly, because she was naturally mild-tempered. She was extremely soft and quiet, and said, "My name is Ling Shi, and my father is Ling Han." "Oh." Rong Xingquan nodded. "This is truly unexpected. To think that Ling Han would actually have such a pretty daughter." He showed an evil grin. It looked like Ling Han would not only be surrendering a single heavenly venerable seal this time. "Who am I? How high and noble am I? How precious is my time?" he asked in quick succession. "Tell Ling Han to immediately come out and receive me on bent knee, or I will rip apart this dilapidated city of yours." Too arrogant. He was really too arrogant. To say nothing of how the servants of the Ling Manor all felt unrestrained anger, even someone with a quiet, soft personality like Ling Shi felt a ripple of fury. She looked evenly at Rong Xingquan, and said, "Sir, you have come to our clan, killed and committed violence, and demand that my father receive you on bent knee. Do you really think that there is no one powerful in Ling clan?" When she said the last few words, she finally revealed the dominance that a ninth heaven celestial king should possess. Actually, while she might look soft, she was tough on the inside, having inherited the Empress's pride and Ling Han's tenacity. However, it was all concealed by her quiet, gentle nature, and it was rare that she would show these traits. "Beauty, fighting, and killing is not suited for you. You should be sitting on my lap, and begging for favor instead." Rong Xingquan laughed loudly, completely unconcerned that she was the daughter of 2 heavenly venerates. No matter how good-tempered Ling Shi was, she could not possibly tolerate this kind of insult. Moreover, she had already decided to make a move. Boom! She moved, stimulating the boundless power of regulation as she charged towards Rong Xingquan. What? The moment she moved, Rong Xingquan was astounded. The techniques Ling Shi used were indeed still within the range of the Celestial King tier, but as she launched her attack, there were over a dozen top-tier regulations being channeled at the same time. This was too terrifying. It was equivalent to having over a dozen peak stage ninth heaven celestial kings attacking simultaneously. Furthermore, they were all mentally connected, and had impeccable coordination at that. This was not as simple an equation as 1 + 1, but had rather been raised to a completely new height. Rong Xingquan hurriedly retreated, and then channeled his heavenly venerate technique. Otherwise, it was extremely possible that he wouldn't be able to withstand even 10 strikes from his opponent. He did not dare parry at all. It was only once he had completely channeled the heavenly venerate technique that a frightening brilliance burst out of his body with a boom. His power instantly increased by over a dozen times, and only then did he exchange a single blow with Ling Shi. Peng! Ling Shi was instantly forced backwards. No matter how freakish she was, if she was still limited within the range of regulations, there was no way she could match a heavenly venerate technique. In the hands of a ninth heaven celestial king, this was a powerful move that surpassed the level of regulations. Even a pseudo-heavenly venerate could possibly be killed by this. Ha ha ha, this is all you are capable of. Rong Xingquan exclaimed arrogantly. Channeling a heavenly venerate technique, not only did he possess the battle prowess of a pseudo-heavenly venerate, he had also become one of the stronger members in this level. Beauty, you had best obediently follow me. Ling Shi raised an elegant brow, and suddenly sent out a palm strike. Peng! Rong Xingquan was instantly sent flying from the impact. You are spouting too much nonsense. Chapter 2833, 2833 Daughter of a Freak. Chapter 2833, 2833 Daughter of a Freak. 2833 Daughter of a Freak. Rong Xingquan was sent flying with a single strike, and that was not the end of it, either. When he landed, he was throwing up blood continuously, coughing so hard that his whole chest was covered with blood. He looked completely miserable and battered. He had not been killed or knocked unconscious. Thus, his eyes were wide open as he looked blankly at Ling Shi. How had the latter unleashed such incredibly terrifying power? The gap between them was like the gap between a child and an adult in battle. How could he possibly match her? How could a ninth heaven celestial king be as powerful as this? It should be known that he had actually used a heavenly venerate technique. This naturally was because Ling Shi had used that small world inside her, which allowed her to possess the strength of a pseudo-heavenly venerate. In truth, she had also done something that even Ling Han had not imagined. Not only was she extracting the power of this heaven and earth, she was also feeding back to it, which allowed this small world to continuously grow. It was just like she was presently a Genesis world herself. However, this world was too solitary and lonely, only having a single dimension. Furthermore, it was extraordinarily tiny. But this kind of alternative path was still a brave experiment. Who knew, maybe she would be able to pioneer a completely different path of her own. Hence, Ling Shi's present burst of power was not something as simple as pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. In fact, it could even be close, or reaching, the level of first tier. Why had she been strengthening her foundations all this while? It was because she was nurturing this world. Impossible. Impossible. Rong Xingquan's expression was filled with confusion. He could not accept this result. They were both at the ninth heaven, so how could the gap between them be as wide as this? Owed debts should be repaid, and one who murders should be executed in turn, Ling Shi stated calmly, but her eyes were filled with absolute determination. The people of the Ling clan will not be insulted. These words roused all the servants of the Ling clan in their surroundings very much. They could tell that not only was Rong Xingquan a ninth heaven celestial king, his background would definitely be even more shocking, yet Ling Shi actually declared that he would pay for his crime with death, which warmed their hearts. Even if the person who had died was only a servant of the Ling clan would still seek justice for them. Even if the offender had a powerful background, they would not care. He, what bold words from a little girl, Zhouwu heavenly venerate finally spoke. He had not moved earlier, because he had been certain that Rong Xingquan could not possibly die from that one strike. If a third-tier heavenly venerate couldn't tell even that, he really should kill himself. He stood, arms crossed behind his back. He did not need to make a move at all, and merely the bit of aura seeping from him was enough to suppress eternity and restrain the heavens. A third-tier heavenly venerate was really that strong. Ling Shi's expression was grim, but she had Ling Han's tenacity. No matter how frightening her powerful enemy was, there was no way she would bow her head. She said, "Senior, you have allowed your junior to come to our Ling clan and cause trouble. May I ask how we have offended you? Take her down." Rong Xingquan leaped to his feet, but the strike that Ling Shi had struck him was no light blow. This quick jump instantly caused him to cough repeatedly, blood once more spurting out madly. Ling Shi was slightly surprised. A ninth heaven actually dared to yell at a heavenly venerate like this. Even the son of a seventh-tier heavenly venerate could not be so arrogant. This was a heavenly venerate that even the heavens had to respect, so how could a ninth heaven be insolent towards them? Jiuwu heavenly venerate involuntarily felt killing intent rise up in him as well. This idiot, did he really think that he could command a heavenly venerate? However, he had already let the act proceed to this extent, so there was naturally no way he would give up halfway. Thus, he sneered, "Young miss, are you willing to surrender yourself, or do you prefer to have me act?" Thoughts raced through Ling Shi's mind. Her father, mother, and aunt Hu Niu were all in seclusion, and it was not clear when they would be able to come out. Meanwhile, the Rain Emperor and the others had missed traveling after such a long period of quiet, so they had all gone to roam the world. Presently, there was actually not one heavenly venerable tier power that could be mobilized in the entire Ling City. Who was this man? It should be known that Ling City was in the center of power of the Lin clan, and had affable relations with Ju and Chu clans. This was a massive, astonishing force. Why had these two people still dared to attack them with hostility? This junior boldly seeks guidance from senior. Ling Shi curtsied slightly. Because Jiuwu heavenly venerate had not moved, she also responded calmly and quietly, not showing the slightest bit of anger. Humph! Jiuwu heavenly venerate sneered, a sliver of displeasure flashing through him. In the past, even Ling Han could only flee from him, yet now he had actually fallen to a level that he was fighting with the former's daughter. How humiliating! To show how proud Jiuwu heavenly venerate was, one only had to take a look at his title. He was the emperor among cultivators, and every word he said possessed enormous might. "Then I will have you suffer the consequences of your actions." He moved. Boom! The air of primal chaos condensed, and it was like the world had just been created, turning into a giant hand of dark crimson, which grabbed out at Ling Shi. Ling Shi's expression was solemn. With a soft exclamation, Wang, boundless light was unleashed from all over her body, her aura instantly rising to the height of the first tier. What? Rong Xingquan immediately gaped, his face filled with disbelief. A ninth heaven celestial king was actually capable of unleashing the heavenly venerable tier's might? This was not a pseudo-heavenly venerable tier, but rather a genuine first-tier heavenly venerate. Impossible. Peng. Ling Shi delivered an attack, piercing a hole in that giant hand of dark crimson. Her body slightly trembled, her beautiful face immediately turning pale, and she appeared extremely captivating, and would touch anyone's heart. Even if she had unleashed the battle prowess of the first tier, a third tier was a third tier. A casual strike would already surpass the first tier, which caused her severe injury. However, this still could not be denied that Ling Shi had created a miracle. Even Jiuwu heavenly venerate's eyes slightly widened, and he felt disbelief. Ling Han was already freakish enough, but his daughter seemed to be even more shocking. The reason that Ling Shi could be this strong was because not only she had activated the small world inside her body, she was also using a heavenly venerate technique. As the daughter of Ling Han and the Empress, how could she not have learned any heavenly venerate technique? With her using pseudo-heavenly venerable tier power to activate a heavenly venerate technique, her battle prowess reaching the first tier was nothing to be shocked about. After Jiuwu heavenly venerate was slightly startled a moment, he regained his arrogant demeanor. So what if she was even more freakish? The gap in their cultivation levels was too wide, and she was still completely no match for him. The people of the Ling clan were too freakish, and all of them had to be eliminated as soon as possible. His eyes sharpened, and he moved again. This time, he was not planning to capture Ling Shi, but was instead going to kill this young woman who had boundless future prospects. Boom! He once again sent out a giant dark crimson hand, which descended on Ling Shi. The power of third tier, capable of killing a first-tier elite countless times over in an instant, was completely released. Ling Shi could not block this. She retreated, but not only did the giant dark crimson hand follow her closely like a shadow, its speed was even faster, and rapidly narrowed the distance between it and Ling Shi. Peng, peng, peng. Wherever this giant hand passed, every structure was destroyed as if they had been mowed down. The power of third tier was really too terrifying. Young mistress, every member of the Ling clan exclaimed, filled with anxiety. However, they were too weak, and even if they wanted to help, they were powerless to do so. The giant hand assailed her, and Ling Shi could only blast out a full power attack, and closed her eyes. All else would have to depend on fate. Boom! A loud bang resounded, world-shaking in its volume. Ling Shi was surprised. She did not feel any power blasting into her. She hurriedly opened her eyes, yet there was an extremely beautiful figure standing in front of her, with both her arms raised to hold up the heavens. "Mother," she exclaimed, naturally filled with joy. Clang! The reaction from the heaven and earth was intense. Immediately, lightning blazed wildly, striking madly on the Empress. "You have broken through?" Jiuwu, heavenly venerate, frowned. He could see very clearly that the Empress's present state showed that she had broken through, which induced a reaction from the heaven and earth. Even if it could do no harm, bolts of lightning were still striking madly on her. "You dare touch my daughter, you are courting death," the Empress declared menacingly. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,